Good evening. The Rancho Board of Education meeting, special meeting for Monday, February 1st, 2021 is now in session. If everyone would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, Secretary Noreen Scott will give our pledge, and please mute your microphone.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you, Secretary Scott. Jane, can you take a roll call for us, please?
Yes, I will. Madam President Galbraith,
Present.
Vice President Morgan,
Present.
Board Secretary Scott,
Present.
Board Member Cullen,
Present.
Board Member Coleman.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Okay, tonight we have a quorum present for our meeting. I'd like to welcome everyone out to the meeting tonight, and especially welcome those who are watching from YouTube in our community. And this has been a difficult year, and so we're grateful that everyone can come together and watch these meetings as we are able to stream them on YouTube this year. I also just want to bring up a couple of, just before we go into Dr. Cleveland's, that tonight we will be talking about reopening, reviewing the reopening requirements and talking about those things, and the board will have an opportunity to ask questions about those things. But we will not be voting on those things tonight. We will just be having a discussion about reopening requirements. And I just wanted to put that out there at the beginning because I know there's been a lot of confusion with emails and different things that we've been receiving on what we are doing tonight. And so with that, once again, I want to welcome everyone, and we will ask Dr. Visu Cleveland, our superintendent. She has prepared some opening comments. Before I go to her real quick, Secretary Scott, did you want to add something?
Well, I think we need to make it clear that it's not our decision not to make decisions tonight, but rather the rules of the board. And Dr. Cleveland may want to expand on that, but we didn't have enough notice to have a voting meeting. Isn't that correct?
Dr. Cleveland, you want to go ahead and well, and honestly, we had come up with this meeting tonight, and our board has made that decision to go into hybrid learning when we put our elementary schools into hybrid, and so this is an extension of that. I think with our meeting tonight, Dr. Cleveland, do you feel like that's correct as we start working through our agenda tonight?
Yes, thank you. Yes, tonight is just an effort to familiarize the board with the requirements, and they are extensive to be able to bring secondary students back. So we want you to understand that and the complexity, and have a chance to ask questions that you may have. And we are starting to work on a plan. We do not have a plan. And one of the reasons at this point is we want to hear from you. We've been hearing from people across the district and the community, but also looking at what those requirements are in order to be able to reopen. So tonight is just a presentation on the reopening framework, and also to be able to answer any questions or hear any comments that you might have as well. So if we could have the PowerPoint, please. And Board Member Cullen called and said, you have it ready, and I shared with her, we're working on it right now. So that's kind of how everything has been, is working on it right now. The time frame has been very short on everything, and so we apologize for that. But truly, everyone is working as fast as they can to pull things together. So I just want to share a few remarks, and then the primary presenters this evening will be Carl Leppelman and Renee Salcedo, but I'll get to that in a moment. So here are some of the general principles that the plan and the district are working from in terms of looking at reentry. Obviously, it's very important we look at the health and safety for those areas that are under our control. And as you know, there are many things that are not under our control, but certainly to emphasize those two factors as we have from the very, very beginning. Also to ensure that our building safety plans are in place and they have been verified by the Rio Rancho Fire Marshal and PED. And I wanted to explain that a little bit. What was decided at the state level was that they would be sending in the fire marshals from across the state to look at all of our safety precautions, things like our filters, whether our student desks are spaced appropriately, whether we have appropriate barriers in the cafeterias, all of those safety requirements. And so there will be a list for the fire marshals, and they will come in and they will be the ones signing off that we have met all of those requirements. And so we certainly have reached out to our fire marshal here in Rio Rancho, and they are aware that this is coming down and that they will be asked to do that. In addition to the visit by the Rio Rancho Fire Marshal, the Public Ed Department will also be doing visits, some virtual, some in person, and they will also be looking at the things that they have deemed to be essential in order to reopening. Do you have a plan? Does the plan address all of the criteria and components? And we are not able to start until they have approved the plan. In this particular situation, as in the first one, in a sense, it is the secretary approving the plan within the framework that they have established. And so one of the first questions we asked was, well, you came and visited for our 10 elementary schools. Will you be coming back for a second visit now that some things have changed? And at this point, they have indicated that they are not planning to return. If you went through the visits initially for elementary, and you actually had hybrid elementary students in the first semester, as of right now, there's no expectation that they will be coming for a second visit. That they may come later on once they get everybody visited that needs to be visited. And you have to be visited if you have never been before. So the vast majority of districts across New Mexico have not had their elementary children in as of yet. So they will have to have visits for all of their schools and for all of their buildings. Ours will be focused primarily on our secondary. The other thing that we think is absolutely critical, we heard this from our Staff Advisory Council last week. They definitely want some transition time to get back into the buildings and to prepare for hybrid and in-person learning. And we did that with our elementary staff. We got really positive feedback. And you know, the feedback we got was that's absolutely essential to let teachers get back in the building, get them ready to set up their rooms and be ready to go. And so we're working from that expectation. And then for those who don't want to return, we've heard from some of them, they need to be assured that if you want to remain in a virtual setting for this year, that is no problem. We'll continue to support that, and no one is forced to return to hybrid. We will continue to offer virtual. And then as our students come back, I think everyone is expecting a lot of requests for support services for the social emotional needs of our students. And so as they return, we're gearing up to continue to support those programs as well. Okay. So this evening, the primary presenters will be Carl Leppelman, who is our Chief Academic Officer, and Renee Salcedo, who is our Secondary School Improvement Officer. And they will describe and discuss the response toolkit that was revised by the Public Education Department and the New Mexico Department of Health. And as we have learned through this process, it's really, they're two different departments, and both have to give their blessing to most things. And so that's new for us. We've not always had to deal with both, but that will continue on given the constraints of the pandemic. So we will actually present to you a plan on February the 8th. And we'll have a chance for you to see all of the particulars and specifics and provide feedback and input on the plan. The new toolkit does, for the first time, allow for the return of middle and high school students. That will be for the very first time this year for any school district. And that can begin as early as February the 8th, though most districts are not going back that early. There are some specific requirements and conditions, as I said, that have to be met. before they're allowed to return. And until we have that authorization from PAD, we are not allowed to reopen. And as we've looked at this, there was an awful lot, tremendous amount of time and effort that went into the elementary reopening, but that will also be the case for secondary. And given the size of secondary buildings, especially comprehensive high schools, it's going to be a very complex task. Okay, so in kind of summarizing, nobody can come back until you have an approved plan authorized by the secretary. You've had your visit from the fire marshal to each school site. You have a visit from the public ed department that all the conditions have been met. And elementary sites, as I said, will not have to be part of this again. And we actually have submitted formal requests to both those entities for visits. And then a return to athletics and extracurricular activities on February 22nd is contingent upon having that approved reentry plan. So nobody can go to practices, no one can participate in competitions, any of that until the plan has been approved in Santa Fe. So when we return to hybrid, it'll be the same things we've heard all year. Certainly, we will be expected to practice social distancing, mask wearing, hand washing, wearing other PPE as needed, and all of those preventative behaviors will be strictly enforced. And we have been assured that that is absolutely essential. A hotline has been created in order to track compliance with preventative strategies. And so anyone who feels like we are not in compliance with that, I would encourage you to talk to your principal first. But if you were not satisfied with that, certainly feel free to talk to any of us, or you can call the hotline and let them know what your concerns were. There will be, superintendents were told in our meeting last week very clearly, there will be consequences for the lack of compliance with any of these requirements. So we're really asking for support from all of our instructional support and administrative staff to be sure that we do all these things. And I'm sure that our staff will be committed to doing that. Surveillance testing, we finally had a very clear decision that came from EEOC. And EEOC is the final arbitrator on this particular issue. And they have indicated that surveillance testing is a condition of employment. And so it is required. You must do it if you want to keep your job. And so we will have 25% of our total staff that will be tested every week. Now that's a lot of people. And it's quite an undertaking to get that organized, to get the notices out, to keep track of who's been notified, get the tests back. And so it's a pretty major undertaking for our HR department. But it is a condition of returning. You must hit that benchmark. And people have asked, well, what if we don't hit that benchmark? Then the response is, well, then you will not be in until you do. So we have not had trouble making that benchmark, and real thanks to the two sites that we have here in Rio Rancho, the site out at Rio Rancho High, and of course the county site north of the courthouse. We have been able to reach all of our goals with regards to contact tracing. However, as we start bringing back our secondary, that's a whole lot more people that will have to go through that. And we'll continue to work with them to make that as simple as possible. You also have the option of the vault testing, which can be done at home. As I've shared in a previous meeting, we have some concerns about it, but certainly that would be up to an individual. We've just simply tried to make those concerns known to the staff, and then they can make their own decision whether they want to do that or not. And then the other thing that stays the same and continues is after 4 rapid responses in 14 days, schools will be closed for 2 weeks. So as we go to larger buildings, very large comprehensive high schools, it's going to be easy to get to 4 rapid responses in 14 days. So we really need everybody's cooperation to try to keep those down. When you close for 2 weeks, everything closes for 2 weeks. And so that's including extracurricular, that's including other things. So we want to do everything preventative that we can do to keep our staff and students safe. We did send the resolution that the board requested to the governor, the Department of Health, to the legislative leadership in the House and Senate, and to our delegation last week. And at this point, we have not heard anything back on the resolution. We are continuing to be committed to getting our personnel vaccinated as soon as possible. We have let everyone know that the minute there are vaccines and they're available and we are eligible, we're ready to go. And so hopefully that will be sooner than later. But right now we have asked, is there any timeline for vaccination of educators that is currently available? And we've told no, there is not a date that's been set and there's no date to share as of this point. Kind of interesting, Colorado will begin to inoculate its teachers on February the 8th. And so it'll be interesting to see how that goes in one of our neighboring states. We do know that there's a shortage of vaccines across the country. And around the time of the election, it was discussed about sending out the reserves and stockpiles of vaccines, and it turned out that they did not exist. And so now we're waiting on just simply basic manufacturing to be able to get those doses out to the various areas in the country. One of the bright spots is that there is a new vaccine which will add to the total number of vaccinations that can be had in across the country in the various states. The other thing, and I know that Noreen Scott shared a conversation she had. I've had a couple of the service providers did receive considerably less vaccine in the last shipment than they were expecting. It is really hopeful that that will be made up in the next shipment that could appear later this week or early next week. But it was much, much less than what the providers were expecting last week. Okay, some of the challenges for secondary schools. It is just so much harder to create true cohorts than in elementary schools. Elementary schools, you have a class. That class stays with the teacher most of the day. They'll go out for specials or for other things, but basically they're together all day long. Secondary, there are no cohorts, and they can't really be created. You take a 9th grade class, for example, and it's true, most everybody has the same English, but you might have English or, an advanced English. But for example, in the area of math, you might be taking Algebra 1, you might be taking remedial algebra, you might be taking AP algebra, you might be taking geometry in the 9th grade. So there's no cohort there. Children in 9th grade are going a variety of different places for their math course. So they don't stay together. And certainly with regards to electives, students don't take the same electives. They're not in any kind of a cohort with regard to who takes band or who takes physical education or who takes Spanish 1 or whatever. So creating a true cohort is really, really hard to do because of the nature of secondary schedules, and high school schedules are particularly difficult, but that's also true of our middle schools. Another factor is that you can have 50% of your enrollment, but only if you stay with the social distancing. So when secondary buildings were built, they were built considerably smaller than elementary. And the reason for that, as you know, most elementary classrooms, there's a sink, there's a prep area, in some cases a bathroom that simply doesn't exist in your secondary buildings. And so they're much smaller classrooms. So you're still going to be required to measure out the 6 feet between each student. And in many of our classrooms, we will not be able to reach 15. The other factor that is a little bit of a challenge is that our high school buildings are above the capacity for which those buildings were constructed. So we have more dividing by 50%, even if it was, a perfect split. You're not going to have that much room in some of the classes. So what we'll be looking at in some of those situations is, can we move them to other spaces, just like we did in elementary? So can you use the black box? Can you use, other spaces so that some of those classes can move and you can have more area? And that's part of what's going to take some time, is figuring out where people go and where you can find extra space for extra classrooms. But we are not going to be able to have 15 chairs in many of our classrooms. That would not come close to meeting the 6-foot requirement. And then, looking at all of this, there's some discussion, well, maybe we could just reschedule and create new cohorts and all of that. A master schedule for a high school the size of ours, or for the larger high schools, or a master schedule for one of our very large middle schools, is not a week or 2-week operation. It takes generally a month and sometimes longer to create those master schedules. They're extremely complex. You run the issue of singletons, for example, that one AP calc class, or that one advanced music theory class, or whatever, which makes scheduling in high schools just very, very difficult. And so it takes weeks to create a master schedule, working really hard on it. And, today you have specialists in your building that work on that. So that's not really much of an option for us, is to recreate the schedule. Then on top of that, recreating the schedule, which would require students to change teachers this late in the year, would be very disruptive to students and staff. So really what we don't want is for them to get a new teacher or a new class or whatever. There's already been so much change and disruption. Creating new sections and new schedules just really is not possible. But on top of that, it's really not very advisable either. Now, this information I'm sharing with you, I want to absolutely stress and emphasize, this is not their plan. And like you, most boards have not looked at the final proposals from their districts. So what this is a discussion among superintendents on what are you doing? And we've had a couple of those. We had one Sunday afternoon. What are you thinking about at this point? And so that's all this is. This is tentative plans. It may not look like this once their boards meet and they discuss it and decide to, maybe that's not the direction they want to go. I still think it's very useful, though, to hear what other districts are talking about and what they're considering doing. So Santa Fe will begin a limited hybrid on February 22nd, and that will be a voluntary return for both students and staff. One of the things that their superintendent has shared is they don't have the staff to open in a regular hybrid. And this has been in the newspaper. They have 300 staff members on ADA paperwork. And so they just simply don't have the staff. So what they're going to do is offer those who want to come back the ability to come back, and those students that want to come back. This is primarily at the elementary level, but they are also looking to do that for some secondary classes as well. However, as of right now, in their discussions, they say they won't consider returning all students to hybrid until everyone is vaccinated. Gadsden, they're going to wait at least until March, maybe as late as mid-March, to bring their secondary students back. And one of the things they thought about was moving their spring break up so that you could take the spring break earlier and then come back a little later and go straight through to the end of the year. Changing spring breaks are really kind of touchy. A lot of people have already made their plans. And so that's one of the things they're going to be discussing as they meet this week. And Gadsden has approximately 50% of their teachers vaccinated as of now. Hobbs is phasing in their return as well. And so they will start with just a few grade levels and add them over time as they see how they're doing, how successful they're being, how many kids become ill or how many staff or whatever. They're in probably the most enviable position in New Mexico because all of their teachers who wanted the vaccine have already received it. So they are they're in a position I think all the rest of us would really like to be in. Las Cruces is still talking both ways too. They will not be starting prior to February 22nd. If they start, that's when they will. And like the others, they too are looking at a gradual phase in with other grades coming later. A lot of the discussion among the districts is to look at 6th grade and 9th graders who've never been in those buildings and don't know even how the buildings operate, to give them a chance to come back and become acclimated to the building, to become comfortable with the building, and then bring the other students back. They are also considering postponing hybrid until everyone is vaccinated. When I asked the superintendent what percentage they had, she said she did not know. On the day that ours was pulled, I was told that they were able to vaccinate about 900 people that day. But their board will be meeting this week and discussing their plans. And really, from speaking with their superintendent, she doesn't think they have finalized anything yet. Still kind of talking about options. And I have not talked recently with the Albuquerque superintendent, but he did indicate that they will be meeting this week to discuss their plans and schedule. One of the challenges, for example, for them is I think he said they have 145 buildings that will have to have visits by PED and by the fire marshal, which is going to be a huge undertaking for them. And so they feel like their buildings are in pretty good shape, but they will have to have those visits. So that will definitely be a challenge to overcome in terms of their start time. And then Farmington, kind of like us, has a limited number of staff already vaccinated. They too are going to initiate a phase in of grade levels, and they will begin their phase in shortly after February the 8th. So you can see people, the larger districts are all over, but there seems to be some commonality here. Don't bring everybody back at once, phase it in, make sure you can do a good job, do it right. One of the questions that I know is sometimes asked about that is, well, if you're phasing in hybrid, does that impact your extracurricular activities? And what we've been told, as long as you're in a phase in, as long as you have a plan, as long as you're implementing that plan, then your extracurricular activities may proceed as of the 22nd of February. Are there any questions before I turn it over to Mr. Leppelman and Renee Saucedo to give you more specifics about some of the things they've been thinking about?
Anyone from the board have a question? And keep in mind, like Dr. Cleveland just said, we're going to have a whole report on this. And so if you want to you can possibly even hold your questions until we get more information through that report. Is there anything? Okay.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Thank you so much. Oh, wait, we do have one. Go ahead, Wynn Coleman.
Thank you. This is Board Member Coleman. I just wanted to get a bit of information. I just didn't get the chance to send over. And I figured I'd pose the question now, and then I went through and have a number of questions, and I'm sure a lot of them will get answered. But based on reading the toolkit, could someone just get the numbers on how many households are in the district? And when I say that, I mean, if there are families that have a high schooler, middle school, elementary. I'm just curious because there was something in the toolkit that made me want to pose that question. So I'm just curious, and not so much, I know our population is almost 17,000, but how many families does that represent, or how many households? And so if that number can just be provided, even if it's later, I would appreciate that.
And I don't know that right off the top of my head.
Yeah.
It used to be about 1.5 children per household, but I don't know if that's still true. So I would rather give you the correct information, and I'll get that to you right away.
Right. That's why I wanted to pose it right now, because I know that I'll have the time to ask the other questions. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. So thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Cleveland. We appreciate those opening remarks and comments. Okay, so for item E is to approve our prioritized agenda and proposed time allocations. Any discussion on our, based off of our agenda tonight? I move to approve the prioritized agenda and proposed time allocations.
Board Member
I'll
Jeff
second
Morgan, a
that.
second.
Okay. Jane, can you take a roll call vote for us?
Yep, yes, I will. Vice President Morgan,
Yes.
Secretary Scott,
Yes.
Board Member Cullen,
Yes.
Board Member Coleman,
Yes.
President Galbraith.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll now move on to our public comment. And I ask you all to be patient with me as I kind of go through these. We had a number that came in a little bit late in the afternoon, and I wanted to make sure I went through them all. So I have them kind of in different spots. But just a comment on our public comment. I've had a lot of people ask about our public comment. And typically in a boardroom setting, we would have people come in and we'd have a specific amount of time where people could give their comments. Because we are in a virtual meeting and sometimes there's private information that are in those comments, I read the name of those comments. As long as we don't have, sometimes we've had 100 and I can't read all those names, and I'll just summarize them overall. But when we have, tonight we have 19, I read the names of those individuals who gave comment and the subject of their comments and summarize those things. These comments have been given to the whole school board. Everyone has the opportunity and read them, and they do read them. This also goes to our district staff, that they can read these public comments as well, and they are available. With that, I want to please encourage our community to continue to give us public comment. It's really important in these times that we hear from our community. And if you wish to give public comment, you can go to the Rio Rancho Public Schools website and go to the RRPS board page, and you will see a form there where you could submit your comment that we will read. So with that, tonight, as I said, we had 19 public comments come in. We received first from Mary Griego, and she has concerns about in-person learning. Nicole Shaver asked that we consider a supervised remote learning for students that are having difficult in the current hybrid or going into a hybrid. She poses that as an alternative to going to in-person. Stephanie Noto asks that we wait for in-person until teachers are vaccinated. She also sent another one that she would like for our board to start meeting in person. Stephen Safer asked that we wait to put secondary schools in until teachers are vaccinated. Cheryl Daniels asked us to please move forward with in-person learning. Cheryl Para asked us to wait until COVID is done with to open schools. Nicole Shaver, again, asked us to reconsider the extended school year calendar that goes into June. Haley Vanderwill is a teacher asking us to wait that vaccinations happen before in-person learning. We also received from Pamela Flores, 2 different ones, about 350 signatures from the community about not returning to school until teachers are vaccinated. Also, we received from Jessica Arrieta that we vaccinate before we go back. And also she sent the same petition. Melinda Nickerson, she wrote questions and concerns about going back into in-person learning. Michael Mascone had the same questions and concerns about going into in-person learning. Jamie Bermudez asked that we bring our secondary school students back into in-person learning. And Gail Natal asked that we vaccinate before we go back for our teachers. Michelle Jensen asked that we go back to school. Miguel Armillo asked that we vaccinate our teachers before we go back to school. And that is it. I read those other ones. So that is our public comment for tonight. And once again, if you desire to give public comment before our next meeting, please go to the RRPS website and submit the form. Okay, we will now move to our item for the evening, which is our report, which will be a review of new reopening requirements. As we go into this, and I'll announce here in just a second who will be presenting, but I just want to also announce that we do have Billy Helene on, who's the president of RRSEU, and Gino Satriana, the vice president for RRSEU. They are on tonight, as well as when we get into the question period. They are on tonight. I just want our board to be aware. And so for tonight, for this report, we will have Renee Saucedo, our secondary school improvement officer, and Carl Leppelman, our chief academic officer, will be presenting.
Well, good evening, Madam President, Calibreth, members of the board, Dr. Cleveland. Thank you, Jane. Right on time. We have a presentation this evening really looking at two documents, and Dr. Cleveland mentioned that earlier, and that is the secondary response toolkit. What does that look like? The updated there in relation to the reentry guidance. And we are working with two different documents and making sure that we're going to address all the requirements before opening the secondary. Next slide. And I think I'd like to say the key to that, really, we do want to open in a timely manner, but we also want to open in a safe manner where students' welfare, staff, and the community welfare is first at hand. So the reentry really has minimum requirements on page 4. As of February 8th, you all know this, that the districts and schools across the state are permitted to open using hybrid model and COVID safe practices. So basically 100% virtual learning is still an option in this model. But as you know, as a district, we've already addressed hybrid at the elementary and are looking towards the goal of opening up secondary. The hybrid learning is a combination of in-person online days. Next slide, please. Really, this slide is really about what is the same and what are lessons learned, because we've learned a lot. We're one of a few districts that have opened and had face-to-face instruction at the elementary level or at any level. And so I have to thank Renee. Thank you, Renee, for doing a crosswalk between those two documents. So there's really no change in the personal protective equipment. So we critically need to make sure that the elimination of standalone option for face covering shields occurred in our first reentry document. Prevention is a key in both documents, making sure we prevent cross-contamination. We do all the appropriate things in our reentry plan as outlined that we do currently at the elementary. Contact tracing, the difference Dr. Cleveland did mention is that in secondary schools, and it does say that in the toolkit, that a confirmed case could result in a significant number of students and staff having to quarantine. And that's purely because the amount of movement within that building. So what we want to do is make sure, as we've met with secondary principals and leadership, that we're trying to cohort the best we can given the schedule within those buildings. So we definitely have to cohort, certainly separate groups in half, but we want to make sure at all possible to cohort as much as we can. Transportation has been an issue, and we want to make sure we've been actually Renee's been meeting with transportation, looking at not only PPE and safety and health and welfare, but also schedule. But face masks are required in buses. They are at the elementary. You skip 2 rows if possible, two masks in a seat. A little more challenging. They get bigger at secondary. The students do, as you know, so it's going to look different on a secondary bus on an elementary bus. And try to assign in cohorts if possible. Food service is different, a little different in a couple of our, particularly high schools. In our high school setting, obviously you have more numbers of students compared to our largest elementary, they'll be in the building. But also we have some round tables. We have some settings that are not as conducive to to only having students face in one direction and making sure that traffic pattern is correct. So what we've been looking at is the possibility of actually renting tables, really bringing in, getting rid of those round tables. And how are we going to do that, whether it's rent or purchase, or get that done? That's one of the areas we still need to look at as a requirement. And the middle schools look pretty good, and I'll show you a photo a little later, but I think that it's something we need to, Mike Baker has been looking into, and we need to make sure that those cafeterias are set up properly. Food service will be a challenge in a large high school, for example, particularly in a cafeteria. Staggering is an issue, obviously, because you have a lot of students, and it could take lunch, extend that lunch period out even further, because we saw at the elementary, our lunches are extended even farther out. So we need to really reassess that and see how are we going to do that effectively. And of course, safe seating. Next slide. Well, here it is. You've seen some of these. This looks a lot like this is Rancho Middle School. You see the barriers that have been built by our facility staff, and they've held up fairly well in the elementary, but we're hoping they'll do okay at the middle school. But this is pretty much what each middle school would look like right now. And one thing that we have to make sure and do, and that will start tomorrow, is a team is going out to take our checklist that we had at the elementary and now is modified for secondary per the state toolkit, and really look at checklist. Do we have everything? What are things you don't have? Principals, what is something we might have missed? Because I want to make it very clear that we have worked with facilities, HR, working with Sal, distributed PPE already. We have set up, as you see, barriers. There are barriers in the front offices. There's traffic. Some area there's traffic patterns and taping and signage up. So tomorrow's visit really for the district site team would be go through and say, what don't you have to make sure we have a safe environment for our staff and students. Okay, next slide. Really, there are some big changes here. The surveillance testing has moved, it's doubled. It's 100% increase from what, 12.5% that we had been looking at to 25%. So that is something that's good news. The state did allow us to use Rancho High School and other means. So I think that's absolutely essential that happened, and we want to thank them for doing that. I think also we worked hard to make sure that happened as a district. Rapid response, same thing as we currently have at the elementary. 4 rapid responses in a 14-day period. The school closes for 2 weeks. Calculating those cases, I won't go through each one of them, but you pretty much have seen that. You have the toolkit. You also have that guidance document, which shows that flow chart. And there's nothing I see that's changed, unless Renee, maybe if you see something, help me with that. It looks the same other than the percentage of staff to be served. Is there anything in there, Renee?
No,
I didn't
there's
think so. I do appreciate she spent a lot of time crosswalking the 2 documents. Okay. And the other thing I want to say before we go into survey with Renee is that we have collected a lot of information from our principals and our leaders at the school sites about what do you need. And it's been a multiple number of meetings we've had, even when the state started asking us, what are your challenges to open up secondary? So Renee, I thank you for all the time and the time of the principals and the staff that have worked to prepare for this event. So I'll turn it over to you at this time, Renee, and thank you.
Thank you, Carl. If we can move on to the survey. So on last Thursday, 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, we sent out a survey to our secondary families and basically asked them, did you choose virtual? Did you choose remote or hybrid at the beginning of the year? What would you want to do now? What would you want to do next year? And do you need transportation if you're coming in as a hybrid student? And the results were basically, Jane, this is all separated out by school. We had 5,362 families respond, about 58% of secondary students. It's broken down by school, but really all of them are very close to 60% hybrid, 40% virtual of the students of the respondents. The only one that didn't kind of fit into that is cyber, which makes perfect sense. They're more comfortable with virtual. So there we only had 29% of the students respond that they wanted to come in virtually. I can just go through quickly. Eagle Ridge, 60% hybrid. Lincoln, 65%. Mountain View, 64%. Rio Rancho Middle School, 59%. Cleveland High School, 59%. Rio Rancho High School, 62%. And Independence, 59%. But of course, that's 58% of the total number of students. Of those who want to come in hybrid, 82% in middle school need transportation and 48% in high school need transportation. So that was 58%, and we gave that, families basically from Friday morning and closed it over the weekend. So it was a pretty quick turnaround. We did have some people filled out 2 surveys, 2 students on 1 survey. So there's probably a little tweaking with that number, but that's basically how it came out. And it's not surprising. Originally, we had 60% hybrid, 40% virtual. So it stayed really consistent. Just to kind of go through, next slide, please, Jane. This is by school. And I'm just going to kind of zip through this. I don't know that it'll give us a whole lot of information. The next slide. Grade level, and it makes sense. We have fewer seniors. By the time you get to the senior class, you have fewer. It's pretty consistent. Next. This is hybrid, what you selected in the fall and what you prefer when school opens. So pretty consistent. Next. Will your child be riding the bus? And what would you like for next year? And return full-time, 60%. The next line is hybrid. And then virtual is 12%. And that last line are the seniors that will be graduating and won't be coming back. Okay, so if you will bear with me just for a few moments, I'm going to give you, I hope that it will be short, but it may not be, such a short lesson on master scheduling at secondary level. Okay, so on the next slide, at Cleveland High School, we used boards. Some people use Excel spreadsheets. It's just what you can see best. This is 2 of 8 boards. So we have a board for each grade level, electives, and special education. And I would bet money that across secondary, it's very similar. Grade level, and then some of the specials. Creating a master schedule begins in February. In February, students start doing a course selection. So counselors go around and make sure and hit all students and get the course selections. In March, we take those course selections and we figure out how many sections of biology we need, how many sections of each course that was offered, how many sections you need of that course. At that time, you're gonna start seeing things like, I only had 10 kids sign up for this class, and so do we need to cut the class or not? You start making those kind of decisions early on. In March and April, you start really kind of, you know how many sections you have, and you're going to start putting the puzzle together. So when you look at these boards or on an Excel spreadsheet, the rows are a teacher and their daily schedule. So that first orange row is a teacher and their 6 classes that they teach, with the white in there being preps. The columns are the periods in the day, so 0 through 8. So you start putting the puzzle together. That might be assistant principals, principals, counselors, content leaders, ILs, whoever works on this. You're going to have to consider things like, is there a core offered every period? So biology, is that offered every period of the day so that I can easily schedule students into it? Does AP Government, which is a semester long, back up to AP Econ? Because students are often going to take those courses. So this isn't only a semester, it's a full year. So you have to consider A semester and B semester. Is band offered at the same time as orchestra? Because you do not want that to happen, because an orchestra student might also be in band. When are the AP languages offered? Because if you have, usually there's only one section of an AP language class. Now there may be a couple for Spanish, but in general, there's only one. So you really want to try to avoid making a student choose between AP French and band, or AP French and student government. So you try to keep those singletons separate. AP Bio is double blocked. Now, do I want the teacher to have a first period prep or a second period prep? Because if you have it one way or the other, then those blocks, which have to stay together, can affect other courses and affect the students being able to choose those courses. Semester-long sciences. You want to make sure and have them backed up with another semester-long science, because a kid needs 4 science credits. And if they finish zoology, which they had 6th period, semester 1, they need to be able to take another science semester 1, 6th period, semester 2, 6th period. Okay, otherwise you have to change their whole schedule. Things like DECA. It's not all day long. You want to make sure, you have to be careful of the placement. AP Psych is 6 periods. Thank goodness, we can just schedule a teacher all day for AP Psych. But you better be careful where you put that prep, because otherwise you can fall into another problem. Speaking of preps, you want to make sure and be careful where preps are. You have to make sure they're woven throughout the days. So like if you look at that orange on the left-hand side of the slide, you see the preps kind of go throughout the days. Now that's an electives group. And we found as we were scheduling that 5th period, we always needed more electives. So you'll notice there's no preps there. I promise there's a reason for all of this. Hang in there with me. Computer science might share CAD's computer lab. So we have to think about when those classes cross and how scheduling works so that one person can, or 2 people can use that room. And speaking about sharing rooms, when I was at Cleveland, there were 22 teachers that floated and shared rooms. So it is finessing all of that together. You can see on some of these, the prep have like a blue covering. That means there's a person in that classroom during that prep. Then we have the special education teachers. Now they teach inclusion classes. Those inclusion classes have to be matched up with the GE classes. We also have to worry about when inclusion classes and when small group classes are offered, because you want to make sure that on that special education board, a student can flow. If they're all small group, in a certain grade level that they can flow from English 9 to Science 9 to Algebra 1 to Social Studies 9. So you have to make sure that all of that flows. Usually in special education, teachers have to take on at least 2 grade levels. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that some years it feels like it's a miracle that we get a master schedule built. You learn lessons every year from master scheduling. I've never had a year where we haven't said, oh, why did we put whatever class, AP, Spanish, back to back with the band class? Because you were forcing kids to make a choice. That happens in March and April. So you go in, you look at the board, you change it. You go in, you look at the board, you change it. April and May, the master schedule is created. Each of those sections represents 20 to 30 kids. And there's about 1,500 sections at the 2 large high schools that have to be built by hand by one of the counselors. So they put all of this into PowerSchool. I don't know exactly how they do that, but they put this whole master schedule into PowerSchool and they push the button. And at that time, you're hoping, it's always a huge, we're just like waiting for the master schedulers to let us know how it worked. You're hoping for 96 or so %. Sometimes the first time you push it, you get a 75% or an 80%. And you can see, it will give you a report where the conflicts are. It might be rooms, it might be classes, and then you have to go in, finesse it, and then redo it, push the button. When you push the button, students automatically fill into the classes. Usually by the end of May, we'll have a pretty good idea of what the master schedule is going to look like. In May and June, counselors are cleaning up the schedules. So if a student has a hole in their schedule, or if for some reason they were scheduled into an English 9 class and they needed an English 10 class, seniors that need specifics for graduation, counselors go through, check everybody's schedule, make sure it's what they need, and then in July, you have schedule pickup, and usually that ends up with a little bit more cleanup. So, and Jane, you can go to the next slide. The reason that I wanted to go through this is basically because when you talk about changing a school's schedule, that's why you see people's face kind of drain of blood. Because, for example, when we got the numbers in July of students that wanted to go remote, it was late July, early August, and school was going to start in a week or 2. We couldn't redo the master schedule at that point. We had to think about, what are we going to do to make this work with hybrid and remote? So at that time, we decided that really the only way to make it work is if teachers taught both in-person and remote students were in their schedules. We didn't have to change any schedules until now. And so now we have to figure out, what are we going to do with this? The other thing, if you change a schedule in the middle of a semester, you have to print out those grades, because once you make that change, you lose the grades because now they're in a different class. Elementary was able to separate remote teaching and in-person teaching, and they did a really good job of that. Because of the complexity of the schedules, we have not necessarily been able to do that. So when we've had teachers, for example, who have filled out the ADA paperwork and their accommodation is a remote, The reason that we can't just make them a remote teacher is because when you pull them out of that schedule, so if I teach 4 sections of algebra, 1 AP Stat, and 1 math modeling, and I need to be ADA, my accommodation is to stay home. I'm going to have to pull those kids out of my schedule, probably at least 60% of them, because 60% of them want in-person learning. So that could be 90 schedules. When I do that, I'm the only person that teaches AP Stats because it's one of those singleton classes. I'm going to have to reassign that class to another teacher, another section. Those 30 kids in that section are going to be displaced, and I'm going to have to do another schedule change for all of those kids. It just, I guess I'm just trying to give you the nuances of scheduling. When I hear that Santa Fe has 300 teachers with the accommodation to stay home, I can't imagine what they're going to do to allow hybrid learning. Jane, could you go to the next slide, please? So currently, our current schedules, and when I talk about, so our current bell schedule, when we made that change in December, I've heard lots of really good feedback about the change that we made for the bell schedule in December. So right now, when the PED talks about possible schedules, these are bell schedules. So they've suggested an AB schedule where you split the students into 2 cohorts. So maybe it would be A through L and M through Z, like elementary. And A through L goes Monday, Tuesday, we clean on Wednesday, M through Z goes Thursday, Friday. It also suggests that you can do that by weeks, as long as there's cleaning in between the cohorts. So week 1 might be A through L, week 2, M through Z, week 3, A through L, week 4, M through Z, but not morning, afternoon, because you can't clean between the cohorts. There's also on page 18 in the re-entry guide, it says that you can do targeted distance or remote learning, which is basically what we're doing when I read this. You prioritize in-person learning for elementary students by spreading them out across school buildings. Have secondary students engage in remote learning. We would probably have to bring 4th and 5th graders in full time to fully address that. Anytime they talk about master scheduling adjustments, so things like teach the core in the building and do electives at home, or vice versa, that's going to be very difficult because of what we just talked about in master scheduling. Okay. Next schedule, Jane, or next schedule. Just to talk a little bit about extracurricular, co-curricular electives. You know, there are things that we need to figure out, and I know that Kurt is here for questions at the end. He'll be able to address this. It's nationally, they've done, from what I understand, there's research showing that wind instrument playing and singing can be done if certain techniques are used. However, PED is still saying that we shouldn't be doing those. Orchestra, drama, visual arts, and dance can engage in their regular activities with certain safety techniques. What we need to figure out is, you know, most of these, for example, band is in a huge room with a lot of kids. Like what numbers can we have in those areas? This morning I was asked, how are we going to, what does PE look like? Does it all have to be outside? Does it have to be, or can we separate it out in the gyms? So these are all things that we're looking at and trying to figure out. Next slide. Cohort considerations. So until January 26th, when these new guidelines came out, we didn't think that this was possible because it talked about trying to do cohorts the same way that elementary does. And Dr. Cleveland kind of addressed the issues with that. The suggestions that the guidelines and the toolkit have made, the first one is a single teacher cohort. The idea there is that you would have a class of 15-ish kids, however many fit into a classroom, and you have that teacher there. Students would continue doing their work. The teacher would continue teaching their classes. They may or may not match, but students would go in and just be with that same group all day long. I don't know what the purpose of bringing kids in if you're going to do that personally. Teacher transitioning cohorting. So you keep the same group of kids together and teachers rotate through. Dr. Cleveland addressed why that would be difficult at secondary. They talk about summer school cohorting. This is teaching one class for a couple of weeks and then moving on to the next class. At this point in the semester, that is not very realistic. And then you have issues with, like, if math was your first class that you took and then you don't have math again until August, there could be a problem. What, in my opinion, saved secondary is when they said that you can divide the student body into 2 cohorts based on enrollment. And those cohorts don't overlap. And of course, there's social distancing within the day. Jane? So just to keep in mind, I know that Dr. Cleveland and Carl both talked about 4 rapid responses and your school could close. But we also need to keep in mind that if there is a positive case, if it's a student and that student goes to however many classes, 3, 4, 6 classes, and you have to quarantine all of those classes and the teachers, it's going to affect every class that student's been in, but it's also going to affect the teachers who teach 5 other classes. So probably a whole grade level could be affected with a case or 2. So it might not close the school down, but a grade level or a large number of students may be quarantined for a couple of weeks. And it's just information so that people are aware that we want school to be in, but we're following all the guidelines. And with that comes the chance that this might happen. Next slide. It talks about in both the toolkit and the reentry that we have to restrict large group gatherings. And this reminds me, we'll also have to look at the Rio Rancho High School as the testing site because we're going to need that bus lane back or the parking back. We need to think about parking lots and commons areas before and after school. We're going to have to provide students space for if they arrive early. It talks about transition times, this like passing periods. And I thought it was interesting that they suggest, and these are just considerations, they suggest additional time, which I personally think is probably not smart. You want kids to get where they're going immediately instead of giving them additional time. And they also talked about staggering passing times or start of the day, end of the day. Staggering would be difficult. one of their suggestions was even and odd numbers, you know, having them leave a little bit later than the other group. You're going to have kids waiting outside of a classroom to get in if they're going, you know, if they were an even going to an odd, or you're going to have kids coming in late. So I'm not really sure I am sure where I stand. I don't agree with additional time or staggering passing periods. Lunches at secondary, I think, will be one of the biggest hurdles that we're looking at. Round tables, according to the guidelines, can only have one person sitting at them. Rio Rancho High School is probably about 50% round tables, and Cleveland High School is all round tables except for the ones along the edge of the walls. I just think that lunches are going to be a difficult time to keep kids socially distanced and figuring out how to get them all to lunch. You know, I can see where you would want an extended period for lunch, just for the logistics of getting them through the lines. But I think lunches could potentially be one of our big hurdles. Next slide, please. So we have Billy coming on, but I really feel like I needed to address staff considerations, and Billy will probably have a much better handle on this than I do. But we do have staff who have filled out the ADA paperwork and have the accommodation of staying home. We have staff who have high-risk family that they're taking care of, and we've given them the opportunity to stay home. You've seen we have to figure out what to do in those cases, because we're going to have people at home, but kids in the classroom. So we can have them teaching from home, but we have to figure out how to do that. We have staff helping at the elementary schools currently, custodians, security, nurses, and EAs that we're going to have to pull back. We're probably going to need to look at some additional nurses and healthcare aides. Independence High School and Cyber currently share a nurse. And when you're in a health pandemic, it's probably not smart to not have a nurse on campus. We're going to need substitutes. I believe at elementary, sometimes it's hard currently to find a substitute when they need it, and we're only going to compound the problem as we start school. We're currently 40 custodians down. We're going to have to figure out a way to fix that. We need to hire EAs. Are we going to have to look at adjusting staff schedules if they need to be? There was a comment in one of I think it was in the toolkit, that staff needs to be there when students get off the bus. Currently, the schedule does not necessarily match that. We need to get a projected start date out for staff, because they have plans that they need to make, and they need to, some of them, it's not easy to make the plans. They may need to find daycare, and that could be if they have a 4th or 5th grader at home, and that 4th or 5th grader is hybrid, they need to find a place for their kids 2 days a week while they're teaching. They need time to set their rooms up. They need to be able to acclimate to the new schedules and locations. We need to get them a projected start date so that they can start putting in place plans that they need. And just like Dr. Cleveland said, the vaccination clinic that was canceled, I think rightfully so, people are very upset about it, and feel that there's a large number of staff who feel like they should be vaccinated before school is in session. And I just think that it's something that we need to put out there and consider for them. Jane? And with that, I would like to bring on Miss Billy Heelan. No, Helene.
You got it.
And she can speak a little bit more about staff.
Thank you, Renee. Board President Galbraith, board members, Dr. Cleveland, thank you for having me again. I do appreciate the opportunity to come to you and talk with you about staff concerns around all things Rio Rancho Public Schools. So Renee, thank you for everything that you just said. I don't know if you've been given enough credit for all the work that you've done, but I feel overwhelmed just listening to you. Thank you for doing all of that. So I want to start by saying that when it comes to school staff, I don't know a single school staff member that would say that they don't want students back in person. If we had our way, the virus would be gone. We'd all be back and doing business as usual. That's what we do. We interact with students. It's a very personal, very relational thing. And I think I've said that to you before. And I don't think a single staff member would disagree with me when I say that virtual is not easy. It is the most difficult thing that every single teacher I know, it's the most difficult thing they've done. It's a lot of work. It's much more complicated and difficult than teaching in person. And we recognize we're experts in child development, and we recognize the need for students to be in person. We totally get it. However, that said, I've heard from so many teachers since March of last year with their concerns for their own safety and the safety of their families. And it's not just about safety too. There are many things that folks are concerned about, and rightly so. I have permission from a couple of folks to read their emails. One person gave me permission to use their name as well. And rather than hearing from me, I want you to hear from them because I think it's important. 68% we surveyed the bargaining unit, and 68% of respondents said that they were extremely uncomfortable being in a classroom, even with all the precautions in place without a vaccine. And so it's a really difficult thing because we were supposed to get vaccinated and then it was canceled. That was a big blow. That was a really hard blow to take. And then it kind of felt like the rug was being pulled out from underneath staff. And then the next thing that we heard was that hybrid was being opened up to secondary. And then yet again, that felt to staff again like it was a huge rug being pulled right out from under them. And so, you know, here we are, 68% of the bargaining unit saying that they're not comfortable being in a classroom because of health and safety. Some of the things that I've heard, you know, one of the emails I got actually is really interesting is that, and I'm going to quote directly from the email, "My greatest concern is not whether or not the classrooms or buildings for secondary will be sufficiently safe. It's the potential changing from what we are doing now to something far different. I'm not buying that secondary teachers really want to go back to brick and mortar. What we've started this semester, we should continue until the end. The students that I teach are doing very well this semester with Edgenuity and virtual. They have adapted remarkably well with the schedule and curriculum. I have more students in the target range than I did last year. More students are attending Google Meets. To even think of changing now or even in the near future is ludicrous. I think of two old adages. Don't change horses in the middle of the stream or river. And if it ain't broke, don't try and fix it. I'm praying that those who make decisions the rest of us will have to follow will take this into account. I don't believe going back to brick and mortar would benefit anyone. I think it will be detrimental. As many elementary teachers experience the changes from virtual to brick and mortar, only to have to go back to virtual, it was difficult for them to make the adjustments as adults. One can only imagine the confusion for students." So that was one email. Another one, and these were both, I was requested to keep them anonymous. This one says, "As we all await this evening's board meeting and additional information from our governor, I think it is really important to consider the real fears, concerns, and opinions of our staff across the district. Having spoken to several of my coworkers, I find we are of the same mind frame. We look forward to going back to the classroom after we have received a vaccine. Many of us care for elderly parents and have health concerns for ourselves and our spouses. Looking at what is currently happening in schools in New Jersey and Chicago with teachers refusing to go back until vaccinated, are we as a union willing to stand strong? And of course, my answer is yes. I hope the school board is hearing our voice. Will you be sending out another survey? And that was a question to me, so I won't read it to you, but asking for another survey. They're uncomfortable and strange times, and often we teachers are not appreciated or heard. And then they just said thank you for the union's support. That same person sent an addendum moments later. As an addendum, at least 2 of my coworkers lost family members to COVID-19 recently. There are probably more that I don't know about. This isn't just about staff. This is about the health and safety of our students and their families. One of my students has lingering effects from having had COVID-19 last semester. Another student lost his mother to COVID-19. His mother. He's 12 years old. This really hit home. We cannot be cavalier about this virus. We have a plan in place. Most kids are doing okay academically. We're teaching. In the new model, I would only see my students face-to-face 1 day a week. That actually gives me even less instructional time with them. So that's another one. And then finally, this person did give me permission to share their name. This email came from Troy, and he's at Mountain View, I think, teaching Spanish. Tonight's evening's board meeting should be considered anything but normal and will impact families in Rio Rancho. I think it is really important to consider the real fears, concerns, and opinions of our staff across the district. I have voiced my concerns in staff meetings with principals and to other staff. In my 20th year teaching and now 50 years of age, I have seen many problems arise in school districts, but nothing is as important as this. Having spoken to several of my coworkers, I find we are of the same mind frame. We look forward to going back to the classroom after we have received a vaccine. Many of us care for elderly parents and have health concerns for ourselves and our spouses. Both of my parents, as we speak, are infected by COVID-19, and they took every precaution to not be, pardon me, let me try that again. Many of us care for elderly parents. Both of my parents, as we speak, are infected by COVID-19, and they took every precaution not to be infected. Myself, at 50 years of age, cannot fathom the idea of going back to school without having first received the COVID-19 vaccine. Looking at what is currently happening in schools in New Jersey and Chicago with teachers refusing to go back until vaccinated, are we as a union willing to stand strong? And so those are a few of the emails I received. That literally is just a few. I've received so many that have a very similar tone. Staff members are scared and they're nervous. They want the vaccine first before going back in person. I'm an in-person teacher, and I will tell you, it's not just about the possibility of getting sick. That hangs over my head all day, every day. I'm extremely careful everywhere I go. I'm careful in my classroom. I'm very careful at home. We sanitize our groceries. We socially distance. I pick up my groceries. I don't see anybody except for my family and my students. And we do everything we can to avoid becoming infected. But it hangs over my head when I'm in the classroom. It's constantly on my mind about whether or not I'm going to be able to avoid getting this virus. And then speaking from personal experience again, I had a positive case in my classroom. I had to quarantine. And thankfully, a week later, I had a negative test result. And so I didn't have to worry. But that week, that 7 days, I sat in my bedroom every day worrying about whether or not I had gotten the virus. And, going from in person to having to be virtual because of that situation was extremely stressful. So all at once, that whole situation, it caused a lot of problems for me personally. And I know that there are other teachers who are going through the exact same thing. It's really trying. It's very taxing. And so I just wanted to share my story so that you could get some perspective about what it feels like to be a teacher in a classroom that's working hybrid. And I want to just close again by just saying that it's not that we don't want to be with our kids. Teachers love children. That's why we do this. We want to be with our kids. I love being in the classroom with my students. I love it so much. But at what cost? I said that to you before, and I just want to impress upon you that, yes, we want to do right by children. Yes, we want to educate, but at what cost? To me, personally, it's not worth the cost of someone's health or their life. And so I know you feel the same way. And I just wanted to share my thoughts and a couple of questions that I have. I hope it's okay if I ask questions. Board President Galbraith, is it all right if I ask a couple of questions?
Sure, yes, please go ahead. And we have a question too for you, I think, too, with Secretary Scott, but go ahead.
For sure. A couple of questions. I have one, which was, have we thought about spring break yet? Because that's coming up in March and people will travel. And so similar to winter break, I'm wondering if that's something that's been considered as well. And then one of the things that we've heard directly from the custodial staff is that the amount of short staff that they have in custodial would impact teachers and staff other than custodial, because we would end up having to play the role of custodian in our own rooms. And that scares me as a teacher. I'm not trained to be a custodian, especially with a pandemic. And so that worries me too. As a teacher, I want to make sure that we're taking care of our kids. And so that was the other question, is that something else that's been considered, please? So those are two questions I had.
Okay, I definitely can't answer them, but I think Carl or Dr. Cleveland might be able to.
Definitely. Well, I'd like to turn it over to Mike Baker, actually, regarding custodial. We had a conversation about that today. Sue, maybe you would like to cover that, those two questions around the custodial issue.
Let Mike Baker address the one
Okay.
on custodians, and I will share just a little bit of what I've heard from other districts about spring break and some things they're considering.
In regard, President Galbraith, Dr. Cleveland, members of the school board. So yeah, we have been trying to quote unquote fill the gap in regard to having so many janitors not be at work. It's fairly common. Typically, we're down maybe about 30 janitors now. We're just in this last week, we're down 40. We do plan on contracting out. We've have in the past contracted out the services for janitorial service, and that has been at our two primarily the large high schools. So what we're looking at doing now is we're looking at hiring privately in order to fill that gap. Most likely we will bring those groups in on a Sunday and on a Wednesday to do the deep cleaning. And then our janitorial staff, they'll focus more on the disinfecting. Cleaning will be done during the day, but more of the disinfecting will occur during the week as people are inside the building. But the real deep cleaning, that will happen when people are not in the building, and most likely Sunday and Wednesdays. And that's what we're looking at right now.
And on the second question, we have thought about it, but certainly have not, moved on anything yet. Some districts are really looking at moving their spring break ahead and taking it earlier, and then not coming back until after spring break, but they're not waiting until the 3rd or 4th week of March to do it. So an attempt to come back and then go straight on from that point forward. Moving spring break, it makes a lot of sense, except for those families that have already made their plans, already bought their tickets or whatever. And so it could certainly be upsetting, but that's what I know. One district in particular is looking at doing, moving their spring break to the 1st of March, staying out an additional week, and then coming back mid-March. So there are some options with that, but your point is well taken. We will see the same degree of travel at spring break that we've seen, I'm sure, at Christmas and Thanksgiving. I don't think we can anticipate it will be any less than it was the other two holidays.
Thank you, Dr. Cleveland, and for Mike, for answering the questions. I appreciate it.
Billy, do you have anything else, or can I let the board ask you a couple questions?
That was it. Thank you so much for asking again. Thank you, Board President Galbraith. I appreciate it.
Thanks for being here. And I'm sure there's lots of, and Renee, really quick, are you and Carl actually done with your presentation to this point, or is there more that will be presented in a minute?
Thank goodness we are done.
Okay.
Yes, we are done. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so let me go to the board, and I know there's questions throughout.
I'm gonna go with Gino because Gino's on as well.
Gino, did you want to add before we go to questions?
No, I just want to just reiterate the educators and all staff, from the transportation to our EAs to our nurses, to our custodians, on how much already that they are overwhelmed and overworked as it is, just with the elementary level being where it's at now. Versus about if we start adding the middle schools and high schools into it, on how much more it's going to take effect on those things. So again, as an advocate for all staff, from the teachers to the counselors to the social workers to the custodians and transportation, we're here just to really voice the concerns of the safety and the return and the safety of all of our staff members. And that's kind of really what we're pushing forward. Is it's not all about not wanting to go back, it's all about how safe we're going back. And so that's kind of what we're here, letting you all know, because we do hear it on a hourly, daily, weekly basis, and it's a huge concern. So I appreciate it, President Galbraith and board and Dr. Cleveland, for understanding and hearing what we have to say. So we do appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you. And we appreciate you being here. I'm going to go to some questions. Dr. Cleveland, is that okay if I go to questions, or did you want to add something? I see that you're unmuted.
Let me just add one thing that despite all the presentation, I'm not sure we did cover, and I just want to throw it in very quickly. One of the other challenges that we are facing right now is also the lack of substitutes. And so that's another thing we're going to have to be dealing with, because as of right now, we are struggling to even have enough to cover our elementary. And I'm not quite sure how we would do secondary. So the point of that is we more likely would move back and forth from virtual to remote as we needed subs, because they are pretty much non-existent right now. So that's just one of the other things that we are taking into consideration. And then the other, I think, I know that Renee alluded to, but I just want to kind of underscore, right now we are short of staffing, not just custodians. We are short of staffing across secondary levels. And so we will begin again to really, continue to gear up our recruitment efforts, but the pool is very, very small, according to Mike Chavez right now, hoping that as summer and things get better, we'll have more people apply to come back and go back into our schools. But as of right now, those that are applying for any kind of teaching position is pretty much non-existent.
Thank you, Dr. Cleveland. Okay, Noreen Scott, I know you've had your hand raised for a little bit. Go ahead. You are muted still, just make sure you.
Billy, the union has the governor's ear, and I'm wondering why the union hasn't pushed harder for vaccinations for teachers, and why we haven't made education a priority on a state level. Colorado is doing it, Illinois is doing it. Why has our union not been speaking up loudly to the governor's office?
That's a really good question, Board Member Scott and Secretary Scott. We actually have been advocating very directly. The day after, I have to put things in order. I apologize. My days get out of whack. So the clinic was canceled on a Thursday afternoon. That afternoon, I was on the phone with the governor directly, not with her staff, with her directly, advocating for our vaccinations as soon as possible. And, unfortunately, as Dr. Cleveland said, there's a shortage, and they do have a priority list, and they want to vaccinate elderly and those 16 and older that have a underlying health condition. I understand it. I get it. I understand why. I mean, in an ideal world, we'd have enough vaccine for everybody, and this wouldn't be an issue. However, it is an issue. And so we will continue to advocate. Our state organizations, we're what's called a dual local. So we're actually part of AFT and NEA, and our state organizations are also advocating very strongly to have vaccinations as soon as possible. And in fact, we actually shared your resolution that you all wrote and signed the other day with that intent of trying to push to get those vaccines as soon as possible. So we're doing everything we can at all levels to try to make sure that we're keeping staff safe and healthy. That's our number one priority right now.
Billy, to do a follow-up on that discussion, we had 2,000 doses at Sandoval Regional Medical Center to be distributed. And what did the governor say to you about that?
They
Because
were
there wasn't a shortage of vaccine.
right. They were actually redistributed to those who are elderly and 16 plus, is what I understood.
Is that what she's told you?
And what I recall from that conversation, yes, they were redistributed the way because they wanted to do it in order of priority. So in that tiered system that we have, of course, we don't want the vaccines to go to waste. That would be a terrible thing. So, so those vaccines were put back into the pool to vaccinate other individuals that were in the priority list as it was discussed by the Department of Health.
Billy, one of my questions is, I don't know what the number is exactly, but only about 6% of Sandoval County residents have been vaccinated, where it's substantially higher in Bernalillo County. And in fact, Bernalillo County teachers are being vaccinated right now. Why the disparity in Sandoval County?
You know,
Did
I
she
wish I could
share
answer
that
that
with you?
question. Yeah, I wish I could answer that question. That wasn't something that I discussed with her at that time because I wasn't aware of the disparity between counties. But you know, I do. Unfortunately, it's a really awful situation where our vaccination clinic was canceled, and we were told several different reasons for it. Quite frankly, the prevailing reason though was because it wasn't our turn yet. Is basically what we heard. So, and of course, to great disappointment.
Billy, I'm glad to hear that you followed up with the governor. I did as well. And I really think the union has the opportunity and responsibility to be on the front lines fighting for these vaccinations for our
Yes,
teachers.
yes, absolutely.
We've been out of school almost a year, and our kids are suffering from that. And I mean, the numbers that Carl gave us right before Christmas of the failure rates in our schools are deplorable. And to say that we're sliding along just fine is inaccurate from what I'm hearing. So we need to be doing something proactively to get this vaccination taken care of. That's really, and I know you're only one person, but you have a union to work with you, and I hope you can really advocate for us.
Yeah, we'll continue to advocate very strongly as often as we're given the opportunity. We'll keep pushing for it. We're going to keep writing, keep calling, and doing everything that we can to make sure that we're keeping staff safe. It's the ultimate goal, of course, this year is to keep everybody safe and healthy. So thank you.
Thanks, Billy, for all the time you and compassion you share with us. We really appreciate you.
All right, thank you, Secretary Scott. Catherine Collin, go ahead.
Billy, because during her address, the governor's address, she stated that they have a plan for the safe expansion of in-person learning for all age groups, supported by the union leadership. Was that not the case? Because now we're hearing that teachers, are concerned about going back into the classroom, but it sounds like she had the ear of the union and was listening to them. But then I am hearing some different perspectives from what she was saying during her address. And I know vaccination, of course, is a big part of it. I mean, she did pull the vaccination before she made this announcement. So I'm just kind of wondering the status here of how this all came about.
That's a good question too. And, we as a local union rely very heavily on our state organizations to do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to working with the Department of Health and the Public Education Department and the governor's office to put in place plans that will keep our staff safe and healthy. And so AFT and NEA have been integral parts of the planning process for reopening. They're hollering just as loud as we are to get vaccinations into the arms of education staff. And that's obviously a huge priority. I can advocate for our local union because I'm in touch with staff here locally. I don't feel adequate to advocate for locals across the state. AFT and NEA are doing a fantastic job of making sure that the union is a partner in planning for reopening. And so a lot of the recommendations that you see in the reopening plans are things that the union has helped to work on. However, having said all of that, obviously the number one goal right now is to get folks vaccinated. We can reopen somewhat safely, but I don't think that educators will feel truly safe until they have a vaccination. So that's why we're going to keep pushing for it.
So was the union supporting, not directly Rio Rancho Public Schools Union, but the state union, were they supporting to opening now at the February 8th, which she had come out, or not, you know, shortly after February 8th? So were they okay with that announcement? Did they feel like we were prepared?
So I don't know that I would actually speak for the state unions saying that they would support a February 8th date specifically. What they do support is making sure that all of the protocols are in place, that if folks are going to be in a hybrid setting and they are going to be in person, that they can do so with every possible precaution. And then, of course, I'm going to keep saying it because it's what I was saying for the last several months, vaccinations. So, you know, that the precautions that are there, they're helpful. They're, you know, and again, I can speak as a hybrid teacher. I've been in the classroom with kids and I've followed all of the precautions to the letter. And that's probably why I didn't get the virus, because I was so careful. But again, you know, we won't really truly feel safe until those vaccinations are in our arms. And that's what the unions are saying too. The state organizations are saying, yes, the precautions are there. We've built these plans together, but we need vaccinations.
So then why was the announcement done before teachers could get the vaccination? I know you can't answer that, and that might be rhetorical, but that's if there was the union support to go ahead and to open this, then you would think that she would have you know, moved up our educators to get vaccinated first before this announcement, or they feel that they can go without the vaccinations. I don't know. I just don't understand the reasoning, but thank you. I appreciate it. I know everybody's shaking their heads feeling the same way.
All right, thank you, Catherine. Dr. Cleveland, I'm going to keep going around to the board, but did you want to interject for a moment? I just want to make sure that when I see people unmuted, I just want to make sure that they don't have something that they want to say before I go to the next.
Just one quick thing. It is interesting. I think one of the saddest things out of all of this is pitting educators against seniors. Nobody wants to be there. Nobody wants to be there. And we all have family, we have parents, we have grandparents, and so it's really hard. It is, though, interesting. And I have one, if anyone wants to see on my phone, a very interesting text from a grandmother in this community that I've known for a long time. And it's really sad. I mean, her comment is, I would give up my vaccine for my children to go to school, my grandchildren be in school. And so knowing the desire, you know, how much, you know, assuming that grandparents don't want teachers back in the classroom to have the vaccine, completely wrong. I mean, they want very much for that to occur as well. And so it is unfortunate. There's not a sufficient supply. I guess the one issue that just continues to be heartbreaking for me is to know that 900 educators were received shots on the same day ours was canceled in another school district, and the unfairness of that, and just the lack of foresight in thinking if you've gone to that much trouble and that much planning, would have been better to have let it go forward. They certainly let it go forward in another county, and so the inequity there. But we are all compassionate toward our senior citizens and do not want to be at odds and do not want it to appear that we don't want them to have the vaccine. Of course we do. And so I think that's one of the saddest things out of all of this is pitting one group of people against another. And we don't want to be there. So, you know, where do we come out of that? We come out of that is that we continue to advocate from this point forward now to get those vaccines to our educators. While we were meeting this evening, I just caught my eye and had an email that came in from Las Cruces Public Schools, and their board has been working on a resolution very similar to yours, and they wanted me to share that with you, and I will do so. Again, advocating for educators to be a priority in terms of receiving the vaccine and asking for the Rio Rancho board to support their resolution as well. I don't think they knew that you had sent yours, so I'm going to send them yours and say I think we've already done that, but they are reaching out to other boards to try to get strong support to keep that on the front burner. And so it's a tough time. But I just want to make it very clear that that's not anybody's goal or objective here. We all are caring toward our seniors, But I want to say in reverse, I believe our seniors care about their children, their grandchildren. And I believe they see their grandchildren's future, very worried about what that future is going to be for them. And, but very much supporting teachers. So it's a very supportive email, and very much wanting teachers to have it. So much so she was willing to give up hers for a teacher in this district.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Cleveland. So Noreen Scott has a comment or a question that she wants to, and then we're going to go over to Wynn Coleman, who hasn't had a chance to talk yet. But go ahead, Secretary Scott.
Yeah, I wonder if it's possible for the state union to speak to us so that we're not putting you on the spot, Billy, but to hear from her directly what's going on and what's going on as far as the union. How hard are they fighting? Because I know the school boards around the state are fighting for it. So I want to hear from the union directly what their plan is and what they're doing. Do you think that's possible?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure we can facilitate that. Now, I mentioned we're a dual local. Would you like to hear from both of them? Because I can make that happen too.
Yes, I would like to hear where they stand and what they're going to do to help us get our schools open.
Okay, let me work on that. I'll facilitate that for your next meeting if that's what you'd like. You tell me when you want them there, and I will make it happen.
Other board members, do you agree with me on that?
I think that would be great. I see Dr. Cleveland shaking her head that would be.
Yes, of course, yeah.
That would be great. And keep in mind, though, whatever we put, we have to have time for that agenda. We have to have that, that 72 hours. So I think that would be great. Okay, Noreen, did you have anything else before I go over to Wynn? Okay. Okay, Wynn Coleman.
Thank you. And thank you so much for everybody that presented tonight. I'm in awe of all the work that everybody goes through. So I'm wondering, when it comes to that resolution, that might be something too that we could share maybe with NMSBA. They might find some way to go ahead and just kind of start that process of kind of getting the districts to really start advocating. And that might be worth as just kind of a template maybe. And I wanted to also make a comment when it comes to the 16 plus with underlying conditions. I would have to say that there's probably very few in our population that would not have any underlying conditions. And that's what's concerning to me. And I've always said that, I think in many ways that I look at teachers along the lines of first responders. But I did have a question about, we're spending all this time kind of talking about secondary returning. And I know that the dynamic is different and more challenging, but Billy, if you could, I'd like to hear maybe what the elementary teachers are, kind of communicating to you right now, as they are the ones that are hybrid, and how kind of what feedback you're getting from them as this discussion is coming about with secondary coming back.
So a lot of the same stuff that we heard in the fall, actually. In the fall, we heard a lot of the anxieties and concerns about health and safety when we were planning on coming back. And that concern and safety, it's a little better because we have the experience now, and elementary staff members have been in the buildings with students. And, generally speaking, most folks are kind of, I won't say okay, because they're not okay, but they are more comfortable now than they were at the beginning of the year. That's probably the best way to say it. However, having said that, elementary staff members, not just teachers, but staff members across the board, are very concerned for their own health and safety for a lot of the same reasons I expressed from my own personal point of view. It's their own health and safety while they're in the classroom with students. It hangs over their heads constantly. They're constantly worried about their own health and the health of their families. But on top of that, it's the prevailing concern is actually going back and forth. This going back and forth and being virtual, and then having to be in person, and then going virtual again. And not just because of like winter break, there was plenty of preparation. People were ready for it. That was actually fairly decent. But when a classroom gets closed because of a positive test, that is extremely stressful for an educator because you've been in the classroom live. And yes, we plan, we're ready now, I think, for the eventuality of going virtual, but it is it's an incredibly heavy load to bear going back and forth. It's very stressful. There's a lot of concern, a lot of concern.
Thank you. And I think that as you talked about that, what I really keep wondering is really kind of understanding the impact that when we are sending not just individual students, but households. And if a high schooler is exposed or test positive, that's shutting the whole entire, according to guidelines, what a family has to do, what a household has to do. And I think that there will be a trickle out effect or a ripple effect in this as we're really kind of looking at the impact that this might have. So, but thank you again for presenting and for your transparency.
Yeah,
and that's all I have.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Gino.
President Goldberg, thank you, and board members and Dr. Cleveland. I also want to comment on that as well, because I do receive a lot of those elementary phone calls as well at the end of the evening and on the weekends when they're addressing a lot of that transfer of going back and forth. It becomes almost, and Billy will shake her head to this, it comes double the work. They have, and I think even when you look at the hybrid model and doing some of those kind of things, and I know that Jana and Renee have been awesome in trying to work with it, but I think they hear it as well, because it's double the work. And it's not only double the work for the teachers, but all the educators, from the counselors and what they have to do from going back and forth to in person, and then back from the quarantines or leaving, for the holiday times. It becomes seriously the double of work and the transition of it all. So, and then it's not all about the fear and the safety part of it, but it's also the logistics of it all, and it becomes draining not only on the educator, but it becomes draining on the students too as well. And whether they're from K through 12, it's going to be coming that draining. When they get into a sequence and they start doing a pattern thing, I think that's, and the educators feel it, be it the EAs, the teachers, and everybody else like that, even the custodians, there's not a constant, there's no consistency behind it right now. And it becomes very draining throughout this whole entire transition period. So just to keep that in mind, I just wanted to touch on that, Board Member Coleman, because I think you brought up a good point of and asked that question, and I just kind of want to add to that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And Billy, why don't you go ahead, and then we'll go over to Dr. Cleveland, who, unless you didn't mean to raise your hand, I don't know.
No, I actually did mean to. I wanted to add just a little bit of my personal experience to this conversation. I teach first grade. And so because I teach first grade, they're small, they're little. I love them. One of the things that I've taken to doing is, we have students who go home and they have to quarantine. The rest of the class is in class still. And those students can't go home and not learn. And so as a hybrid teacher, I'm also tasked with preparing virtual materials for students who are home. And that adds a whole other level of complexity to it. I've never worked so hard as a teacher. Never, ever, ever. It is incredibly complicated. And, it's helpful in a way to have those materials ready, because then if for any reason we do have to go back virtual, well, I'm ready. But it's hard. It makes for very long days and nights and weekends. I don't really take days off anymore because I can't. I have to have things ready. And I know teachers across the district are doing the same thing. It's a huge, huge burden. And so it's very complicated. And I just wanted to share that other little tidbit that I was reminded of when Gina was talking.
Thank you for adding that. Okay, Dr. Cleveland, go ahead. And then after Dr. Cleveland, we'll go to Jeffrey Morgan. Sorry.
Just a quick comment on that. I think it's important that we realize that's very hard on families. And so, tomorrow I need childcare, and I didn't have it planned yet. And so there is, we've heard quite a bit from families who said one way or the other, but the change back and forth is very hard for us to manage. I mean, I may not have childcare. And so That's another piece of really advocating, not going back and forth. They really like us to stay one way or the other because it just is very hard to arrange for childcare for their remaining younger children. And some have written some very interesting comments about the need for that consistency because they stand to lose their job. And so concern about, I have to go to work and I need that consistency and I can't be giving my boss notice one day in advance. On the other hand, many employers are very generous and very kind and work really well. And I just want to say that a lot of the employers in this community, I think, have been extraordinarily supportive and accommodating. Unfortunately, there are a few maybe that are not, but it's not just a staff issue, is my point. It's also a family issue in planning for those days as well.
Thank you, Dr. Cleveland. All right, Vice President Morgan.
Yeah, I just want to say to Renee, Billy, Gino, and Carl, thanks for all the work that you guys are doing. Very good stuff. The presentation was very, very good information. And after listening to all of this, it sounds like to me the shot is the most important thing at this particular time. It seemed like everything seems to be hinged on this shot. The second most important thing, and you guys are going to have to help me out with this, it sounds like to me that we still have a major shortage in staff. Dr. Cleveland alluded to that. If we do, how soon will we be able to get fully staffed to get to where we need to be? And then all of those individuals, how soon will they be able to get their shots to be able to start to teach as well? So that was something I was thinking about. If we hire, let's say 50 teachers over the next 2 weeks, I don't know how many we need, Renee, I really don't. But whatever that number is, when will those guys get their shot so they can officially be ready to go to teach? I mean, that's the question that I have.
Thanks, Jeff. I see Dr. Cleveland's raised her hand. I don't know if you want to go ahead and address that, Dr. Cleveland.
No.
No. I can go to Carl if you would like.
So, somebody, please.
Well, yeah, Vice President Morgan, definitely, it is a yo-yo. It's a staffing issue, and we've been talking. Renee and I have been talking, and Dr. Cleveland about to HR, others as well. Staffing, it's supervision too, and so when people get quarantined out, it's a domino effect. But just getting it. Everyone staffed, and I don't have all the staffing numbers. Renee, I know you have a better probably handle on that. Just EAs. I mean, just trying to get our EAs staffed that we already have currently allocated to schools, they're still open. So it's not like we can just go out and just find qualified EAs. And I agree with you, Vice President Morgan, that, yeah, how long would it take for them to get system and get that done? So we definitely have some barriers. We definitely have some hurdles. And I was a former hurdler in college, but these are major hurdles. And there are 10 of them that you heard tonight in about 100 meters. So I think that we can, we need to address staffing. We definitely need to talk about the safety of our staff, and the vaccinations, I think, are absolutely critical. I agree with you. Renee, do you have more numbers, actual numbers in front of you as far as secondary openings? I know we were looking at that.
Yeah, I just texted Mike Chavis to see if he knew. I know that as far as teachers who have the accommodation to stay at home, I hate to just give a number because I'm just not positive of it. I have a number in my head, but I'm not positive enough to give it.
We can bring back that information.
A lot.
Yeah. And maybe we could come back, Dr. Cleveland, maybe we can come back and get those numbers across all those secondary schools by school. But there's additional needs, as Renee mentioned, at Independence High School, cyber. You had to have a health person there. And Renee and I met with each of those principals, and there's some other issues there around counseling and support. So we need to make sure those are in place before we open those schools.
Okay.
I just add one thing. This is not just a challenge to New Mexico. You may want to look at the news, what's been going on the last couple of days in Georgia.
Right.
The very same situations playing out there. And so what we really need is a national strategy. If we want to get our children back to school, we have got to get our staff vaccinated, and it needs to be a priority, I believe, at the national level to make that happen. But they're dealing with the very same situation we're dealing with here.
And Dr. Clay, may I add that the interns were an excellent idea. Without those interns, we couldn't have done the elementary, and the secondary interns were down at the elementary. So we have secondary staff at the elementary. And as we open secondary, that will pull resources from the elementary. So it becomes a catch-22. And so I think that will be something we need to consider because the custodians were helping at the elementary, for example. And there's a difference between cleaning and disinfecting. As Mike Baker was saying, we got to deep clean. And we got to make sure those rooms are, yes, I see Billy. Yeah, the teachers don't have time for that. We got to make sure those bathrooms are clean, that everything's correct. And so staffing will be critical. If we had enough, it feels like you need a National Guard at times just to come in and help out. And I'm actually thought about that idea, but really we just need the people there to help support the schools if we should open.
Mike Chavis did reply 2 weeks ago. We had 20 GE, so the general education teacher openings, and 17 special education teacher openings.
Did he give you EA openings? Because I know Jerry said there were openings in
He did not.
Okay, I think there's some significant EA openings also.
I agree.
Thank you.
And additional requests for EAs.
Okay. All right. Wynn Coleman.
Thank you. And this is Board Member Coleman. I do want to just throw out there the idea that I had mentioned, it might have been 2 meetings ago. If there's some way, and I know that there are so many things that the district is trying to figure out at this point. But in regard to educational assistance, if there is the opportunity to even just kind of consider if there might be some program that can be introduced to high school students to work maybe with elementary and the educational assistant, somewhat kind of a role like that to alleviate some of that burden. And then that might allow kind of a flow as we look at secondary. But I think that there are programs, and I can even kind of get that information, and I will make that commitment. But I think that there might be a way to kind of address some of the EA needs, at least at the elementary level at this point.
Okay. So Dr. Cleveland, I guess I have a question. Is, we're talking to the, our teachers union, which I'm so grateful you guys are here. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. And we're receiving this great presentation that has been put together. And I'm feeling sad. I can't see how we're going to move ahead. And so I'm kind of trying to get a feel, because the feel to me is that there's just no way we're going to make this happen. And so, Dr. Cleveland, can you kind of address what you're thinking as far as the district level? I know we're not making we're not voting on something tonight or anything like that. But as a board member, I just kind of I guess I need more of a feel of where we are headed and kind of what your recommendations might be at this time.
Well, I think we're still working on that. And I think, if we move forward at the secondary level, I can tell you that one of the things I think we've got to look at is what the other districts are doing and start with very small numbers and move from that point forward. But that being said, I really do believe that we should have our staff vaccinated. I think that is the #1 priority. And I think the state made a very conscious decision the day it shut that down and refused to let us have those 1,800 people. They made a decision for us not to have that. But I also think, though, on the other hand, that when we had the announcement that was made by the governor, it raised everybody's expectations in the state that that's where we're going and that we're going there right away. And so as I talked with, every other district, they're all moving right now. They are planning to move in that direction. Whether they change their mind once they look at all of the requirements, whether they, look at all the facts, and, I don't know what they're going to do. But I think we were put in a very challenging situation because I think the general community believes that we're moving that direction. And I think they were given every reason to expect that. And as I said, and it made it sound like everybody was pretty much on board to move that direction, including our unions, including our superintendents, including everybody. And so it was kind of I think everybody is in absolute agreement that we need to get back. I don't think there's anybody that thinks we don't need to. We are in 100% agreement that needs to happen. It's just, how does it happen and how fast can it happen? And so, I don't usually belabor a point. There's no point. And I'm trying to move past it. Truly, I am. I'm still so angry over what happened that day. But I think that had that happened, we wouldn't be having any of these conversations. Every teacher who had wanted, or educator who had wanted the vaccine would have had it. And by the time we opened, full immunity would have kicked in for them. And so I am a tad bitter about that. And I'm also very angry that on that same day, 900 teachers in another district were vaccinated and they didn't shut that one down. So I'm having a hard time, to be really honest, President Gallup, getting over it. And I'm trying really hard to get over it because I know it's in the past now and we've got to move forward. But I do think we need to move forward when we can. The question is, the best thing of all would be to get everybody vaccinated like we had our plans for and move from that point forward. In my opinion, would be the best thing to do. We've been put in a position of not being able to do that. And my last comment is, I don't think that we can not move forward if every other school district in New Mexico moves forward. I mean, I don't think that's probably going to be very easy to do either. So that's my thoughts on it right now. We'll continue this week to work and see what kind of plan we will recommend. I wish everybody in the community understand the complexity of it. I wish every parent who wants to go back realizes it might be short term and their children might be back home in a very short period of time again. I wish they understood that we're probably going to see a lot more cases develop out of high schools than we ever saw out of elementary. It's the nature of high school students, to be more socially interactive, and you have much less ability to control their social interactions with each other than you do at the elementary level. So, like all of you, very torn on this situation. But I do not think it's an unreasonable request that staff has to be vaccinated for their protection, and not only for their protection, but for the protection of their students. And that's what sometimes we're forgetting as well. And I have had parents ask me, will I be able to share with them whether their child's teacher is vaccinated or not? And I explained, I will not, because that is protected medical information. The teacher could share it if he or she would like to. And that's up to them if they would like to, but we're not going to be able to provide parents with that. And so they said, well, how do you expect me to send my child back in when I don't know whether the teacher has COVID or not? I said, the very same way that the teacher doesn't know if your child has COVID or not. And so it's quite a difficult situation. The bottom line is there's no good answers here. There's no simple answers. There's no easy way out of this at all. And we're just going to have to decide which direction we go. And whatever direction the board supports, we'll support it and make it work. But I do think it's been a very good conversation this evening. And this didn't have to happen. This conversation didn't have to happen. And it did.
So I know that there's board members who still want to say something. Just give me a second and I'll get to you, I promise. But I mean, and I know that our academics are important, but all in the while we have our extracurriculars and our sports that are hanging kind of in the balance of this. And I know that it is 100% important for academics and all those things, but I have 4 kids. I have kids who are in sports. And I'll tell you, I have one of my kids who has struggled so bad, and that's the only thing keeping her going. And so I'm really, really upset, and I'm sorry I'm getting emotional, because someone has to advocate for our kids. We're advocating for our teachers, but I'm upset because we're holding that kind of hostage for them. And it's important for them to, at some point, be around each other. I'm like everyone else. My parents, they live with me in my home. They're older. And I don't want them to get sick. And I say to my kids when they want to hang out with their friends, like, wouldn't it be awful if grandma and grandpa could get vaccinated next week, but but we gave them COVID, like, and something bad happened, that would be horrible. But at the same time, like when they're outside doing these sports, and they've been able to have their pods, I feel like, man, they're safe, they're wearing their masks, they're doing all these things. And so now we're having such a hard time getting our kids in, and we're not going to necessarily be able to, and it's not just the sports, it's the extracurriculars on top of it. You know, we just had a great presentation from our STEM club at Cleveland last week. That was phenomenal, and what those teachers have been able to do online. But it has been a year almost, in a month and a half, we are a year since my kids have had to be home. And I love my kids. Like, we are a good family. We're tight, but man, like, they're getting comfortable. And that's what makes me the most nervous, is that all of us are we're getting comfortable in our houses, and we're making decisions out of fear. And that is not a good thing either. And these kids, man, they need us. Some of them are living in homes that are so hard. They need to get away from those homes. And I'm so concerned because I see what's happening in my own home, and I work here. I teach here at my house. My husband works from home, and we are close family. Their grandparents are here in our home, and they are struggling. And so when I think about those kids who don't have that, I am sickened inside. And I say, teachers, parents, families, like, you guys are sending us emails all the time. Please send it to your legislators. Go talk to the governor. Please, please, please. Gino, I can see that you have something. I'm gonna let you go, and then we'll go over to our board members. Go ahead.
So President Galbraith and board members and Dr. Cleveland, I'm going to just mention something. It's in the works. And Secretary Scott, you had asked about how the unions and how proactive, and I'll touch on this. Last night, there was a meeting with the governor and what the hybrid sports was going on. That if there's comments right now that if the hybrid, if you don't go hybrid, you won't be able to participate. Right now, there's some works, and our union, both NEA and AFT presidents were both in that meeting. They want the definition of quote unquote hybrid strictly for those extracurriculars, because we're not only advocating for, back to school safety and all this, we're also advocating as a whole in for all the students, whether they're being in band, whether they're in any extracurricular activities, athletics. So they're getting right now, they got jumped on that because on the news, and Sally Marcus is helping out through the NMAA and doing those kind of things. They're already being proactive now to figure out what is the language, what's the definition. I don't know the answer to that, but I will say this, President Galbraith, the union is working on that as well, because we want to make sure that the whole entire public school setting is taken care of, from dance to band to chess clubs to athletics, baseball, football, all those things, female sports. It's in generally the encompass of all public education. And we can assure you that we are being proactive as voicing an advocacy of all of those in the realm of public education. So I know I did see you get upset, and it does. I'm an ex-athlete and a coach as well. And yes, those are all the things that we want to make sure that it's all encompassed together. We just don't segregate one specific areas. We're doing this for the entire public education. So hopefully that'll ease your mind a little bit, but we are in the process of advocating for that and getting some answers on that behalf. And Secretary Scott, Stephanie Lee and Mary Parr Sanchez will be available whenever Billy does get a hold of them, and they'll probably know a little bit more because they were involved in some of those talks. So just so you know, we as the union are proactively working on that. So I hope that puts your mind at ease, President Galbraith, and makes you feel a little bit more comfortable on that.
I do. I appreciate that. And I think it is important, like you brought up band and all of those things. And I've had parents who contact me, their kids are seniors and other states are open and their kids are losing out on, that's where some of our scholarships come out of, are through our band, our choir. I mean, I don't know how many of my students last year had scholarships for choir, and we can't do those things, and it's really hard. So I'm going to go to Dr. Cleveland, and then we'll go over to Wynn Coleman, and then over to Catherine Cullen. But I want to let Dr. Cleveland talk first before we get off this subject.
Just very quickly, just a clarification. Something I heard, I want to be sure that the board is aware of. you do not have to have all students back in hybrid in order to be able to access extracurricular activities. So that has been, we have heard that pretty clearly. So those, and districts that were, and the majority of districts that I talked about tonight are going back with small starts, so 6th grade, maybe in a 9th grade or whatever. They said that will suffice to qualify. So you don't have to have all of your secondary students back to be able to do that. The other, just very quick thing, I've talked with Larry Chavez and a couple of the other coaches, and the coaches are very sad that they've been put in this situation where they feel almost like they're being kind of held hostage and putting them at odds with their other colleagues because they certainly didn't want to be in that situation, and it's very uncomfortable for them. And then the last comment is that, we asked the secretary a little bit about that, and he said, well, what we were trying to convey was academics were as important as athletics. And that was one of the reasons that we did that. And frankly, I think it was one of the incentives to try to get people to move in that direction. Obviously, that is the direction that our state would like to move now. And it was an incentive. It was perceived as an incentive to get people moving in that direction. But it definitely was, it has put our coaches in a very difficult situation because they too want to start up and they want some of the season left. But they also don't want to be at odds with the other people they work with every single day.
Thanks, Dr. Cleveland. Okay, Wynn Coleman, and then we'll go over to Catherine Cullen.
I'm good.
Okay.
So.
Are you sure? Okay. Okay, go ahead, Catherine.
So there's a couple of things, and I know we've been talking a bit with the union, but for one, Dr. Cleveland, do we know how many school districts in the state have gotten vaccinations that went through with their clinics?
I don't know specifically, but I know it's a large number. I know, for example, for an absolute fact that every teacher in Hobbs that wanted to be vaccinated has been. And so not all chose to be. Some did not want to take the vaccine. But I think the standard across the state is if you have the opportunity and you choose not to, that's certainly your right. But then at that point, you do move forward if you've had an opportunity and you choose not to take it for whatever reason. I know that Gadsden has about half their teachers. I have their superintendent. They about 50% of theirs, their staff vaccinated, and they are one of the larger districts. I have no idea how many in Albuquerque have been. I know some have been, and that's a reflection of that larger vaccination rate compared between Bernalillo and Sandoval, I am sure. I do know that Santa Fe has a very large percentage of their folks vaccinated, but as I think you gathered from the conversation, much of that is that 300 of their staff qualified for ADA. So obviously they would have been in the very top tier to be vaccinated because of their medical conditions. So I'm trying to think of some of the other districts that I know. We talked to Clovis. They say at least a third, maybe a little more of their teachers have been vaccinated up till this point. And I know that Las Cruces has had a good number vaccinated, and they're estimating, and they really underscored estimating. They think about a third of their employees have been vaccinated, about a third. So, and we have had, as you know, a small number, primarily of our drivers and our custodial maintenance folks. We've had a few that have been vaccinated as well, but not that percentage. So I'm trying to think of the larger districts. I think that Gallup has a good number vaccinated, but their whole situation is just so different than the rest of us because a lot of their vaccination thing is all tied into the Navajo Nation and other the tribes, Zuni, and so you really can't take what has been going on in Gallup. It just doesn't really apply very well to the others. And the last one that I know, I think is almost like us. I think that is Farmington, and I know they've had a small number that have been vaccinated, but I don't think they have nearly as many as some of the other districts have. So That's the little bit I know. I know there's some small districts that have been able to get a good number, but they don't have very many people to start with. And so I think it varies across the state. But it's very fair to say to the board, there's some districts that have far more vaccinated on a percentage basis than we do in Rio Rancho.
Yeah, and even when you look at the county, we have like from that article 14.3 in Bernalillo County that's been vaccinated. In Sandoval County, it was only 5.1, which Noreen was talking about. And, so when we look at the vaccinations, I mean, we could have really put a good dent with the 1,800 teachers, educators in there. But moving on from the vaccination part, so this is going towards more like Renee, and it's going to go back to a conversation that I had with you, Dr. Cleveland, a few months ago when we're talking about hybrid, and we're looking at scheduling, because I know that's such a daunting task, and I've seen that board at Affentringer did show me that board years ago over at Cleveland and how complex it is. And so when I'm looking at this, and so just take me through a teacher, say an English teacher, that she goes in and she's teaching at hybrid. And I'm just going to take with one teacher to try to kind of narrow it down. And so she has teacher, is this going to be a teacher that has both hybrid and in online learning? So I'm a student. I have Miss Jones, and Miss Jones is going to be going back as hybrid, but I've decided to stay online. And you're talking about trying to switch around schedules and all that. Can we keep the same teacher, and that we can video them teaching? Because I know that some schools have done this across, I think in the States, and private schools have done this, is that they're videoing the teacher in the classroom. So then you have students in the classroom, but then you also have the ones online learning. And so they're getting the same type of teaching at the same time as the online and hybrid. Is that kind of what we're looking at? And can you kind of walk me through it?
Yeah, that's basically what we're trying to figure out how to do. I know there are some people at elementary that have figured it out that we're actually talking to, but you're exactly right. So whatever schedule was set up over the summer, we kept that schedule. So if I have an English class, and my English class is normally 28 kids, so the makeup of that class is dependent on what those students decided to do. So we didn't schedule a certain number of remote kids and a certain number of hybrid kids in a class. It's kind of up to chance. So if we went back like on an AB schedule, my first period that I had 30 kids in, I might have 15 kids, a 50-50 split, that are in person. Half of those kids, depending on their names, might be here Monday, Tuesday, the other half on Thursday, Friday. And at the same time, I would have the other 15 kids at home. So what you're thinking is exactly right. Almost everybody, unless it's just by chance, is going to have that split of hybrid and remote, of in-person and remote student in their class. And so what we have to do is figure out how we can, I don't know if, and we need to talk to staff about this, if it's having a Chromebook set up so that students can sign in. We need to figure out exactly what that would look like.
Because I think we talked about that, Dr. Cleveland, before. It was when I think maybe Scott Affentringer had talked about that, videoing in the classroom and sending that out. I don't, and that seems like the easiest way to do it, so that everybody's on the exact same page and that there's no changing around. I mean, there's still going to be a lot of scheduling and how we're going to do this, but they're going to continue staying with the same teacher that they have for the rest of the semester. But whether you're doing it there at the school or online. And That seems to make more sense. And so, and it seems like that would, I just don't know the capability of all of our classrooms to be able to do this as well with the equipment that we have. But I mean, since we have so many Chromebooks, and there has to be a way to be able to do it and to be able to stream it.
We did
I see you
talk to
shaking.
Paul, we talked to Paul Romero about it, and you
Mhm.
know, you can buy much more expensive technology to make it happen, but it would be, I want to say he said like $2,000 a classroom, which we obviously can't do. And I would imagine that right now we wouldn't be able to order that and get it in. So I think that, but he did talk about as a makeshift way using Chromebooks. I don't know what that looks like for a teacher or what it feels like. You know, I don't know. We would have to try that, but that's the thinking.
Okay. Yeah, that just seems to me makes more sense if we figure out how to do that and be able to do it all online. Then we're not moving students and finishing them out through the semester. So thank you. I think that was about it. But I'm sure if there's anything else, because I'm going to be looking over all this, I'll be, and can you send your slides on over to us as well? Because I would like to review that in depth. And that way I can send it on over to the district office, any more questions that I might have.
Yeah, you know, my only thought is with like trying to, because I've been thinking about that as a teacher too, how to, if we broadcast to the rest of my class who couldn't be there. And I can't, like, sometimes it's like you can see, these are high school students, you can see them on their phones, like it's reflecting in their face. And they're also in the meet. And I'm trying to think of how in the world I'm going to keep my students who are on the computers attention during that time. Anyway, honestly, that's given me anxiety trying to figure out, and I understand our teachers' anxiety of trying to figure all those things out. And the kids get really, they have a hard time being on a lot of Google Meets. And so then once again, it's kind of spread throughout the day. Anyway, those are just kind of my thoughts as we kind of look at those things as a parent and as a teacher. That so.
But if you don't mind, President Wilbert, it
Yeah.
seems like a large percentage of our students want to come back. Our families want their students back in school in the hybrid remote. About, what was it, the percentage, about 60%?
Yes.
About 60% of our students want to be back, or the students or parents, and or they want them back in the classroom. And so we are seeing the need of needing to get these kids back into the classroom. We know mental health wise, that's been a big barrier for a lot of these families. Is you know, suicide rates are up, and you know, without going into this, because we've gone into this before, and I think the vaccination clinics was the last straw for a lot of teachers, unfortunately, when they canceled that. You know, so it's a lot to think about. But I also got to think personally, you know, when we're looking at this, for me, we have a large percentage of students that need to get back in the classroom. So thank you.
Thank you, Catherine Collin. Noreen Scott?
Yes, just a moment. One of the things that I have seen done is using your phone camera to broadcast. We have a minister in one of our churches who's broadcasting his service every Sunday by propping the phone up on the altar, and it's working, and it's not bad. It's pretty good reception. So I just throw that out, you know, as a thought. I have done remote teaching online where we had people all over the country, and we didn't have a real sophisticated camera, and it came off pretty well.
Thanks for sharing that, Noreen. Yeah, sometimes with those phones, though, you can get all the background noise of everything else. And if we have students in the class, that does cause a little bit more of an issue. So thank you for sharing that. Board, more questions, concerns that you would like to have addressed? Dr. Cleveland, really quick, as I know we're talking about, kind of our reentry plans, but kind of, I think it's still kind of in that, like we're coming up on graduations and stuff. Like, what is that kind of looking like at this point as well? Has there been talk about that? Last year, we ended up doing drive-bys and such. Are we looking like, I'm hearing there's announcements about graduation going around. And so just kind of as we're looking at this reentry, does that affect anything with graduation? You're muted, by the way. You did really good all whole meeting.
You're now even holding up how much money I owe. Jane held up $10 bill earlier today. What we have heard to this point, and we do have a meeting tomorrow morning, and I think this issue is going to be coming up, that there is no anticipation right now of allowing for large group gatherings yet. We're not at all out of the woods. And so we have not been encouraged to think that we would have a traditional graduation come May. As of right now, it just doesn't seem to be where the numbers are heading, but they have not made any official pronouncement yet. But we have been encouraged not to enter into contracts that we cannot get out of, and to be thinking, and if there were any graduations that were allowed, I know that Renee and others have been working to think if we were to have some, what would it look like? And it would definitely have to be outside. And we would be looking at doing something not inside the Star Center or anything like that. And it would be very limited as to who could attend. Probably only be a couple of tickets a person. And it would not be like our traditional graduations if we're able to even have that. So we're planning as a best case scenario, something like that. And Renee can comment on that because she's done a lot of work with that. I think that as of right now, there is zero indication that we'd be able to go into the Star Center and have a traditional graduation unless things were to dramatically improve. And I have not seen on any of the news programs any projection that people are thinking the CDC or others are thinking that's a possibility in the future.
We, with the hope that they would allow us to do something, both schools would use their stadiums, which is actually really exciting to me. So that's that's the hope that we could figure something out. So we are planning, just in case a miracle happens. We want it to. So but the plan would be the stadiums.
And we would pray that it is not one of those 55-mile-an-hour gusts of wind that accompany us so often in the months of April and May. And surely after all we've been through, it would be a lovely day. So that's what we're hoping and thinking. But we could pull off a graduation in our stadiums. That would be quite nice if they let us have it. It's just that you would not be able to bring your big extended family because you would still have to adhere to the 6 feet. But every child could have something and they could have some family there. That would really be nice to have.
Thank you. And on a thought of that, as we talk about bringing in our groups, and maybe our seniors is a good group to bring in to help them to kind of get finished with the school year, especially those that we're really concerned about as they're trying to graduate and things like that. But do you think, have you thought about a specific group yet, or is that just really still in the works of?
We thought about either 9th or 12th. And there's really good points for both. Seniors, based on what you've just said, getting them through and letting them have a little bit of a year before they finish would really be a nice thing to do. But 9th graders are also awfully lost. And so we're probably seeing the most severe academic loss among our 9th graders. So Renee, what would you add to that?
At middle school, maybe the 6th grader, both at 6 and 9 were they're new to the school or seniors.
Thank you. I see Catherine has a comment, and then we'll go over to Wynn Coleman.
And I don't recall if we've seen this. I know that I had asked for the numbers, and if I missed it, hopefully I didn't. I wanted to know the numbers of the ones at the end of the semester that had failing grades.
Grades
so
were scored on the 29th. So we didn't have solid numbers until the 29th. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I find you on the screen. Go ahead. There's all these
Grades
people.
grades were stored on January 29th. And so we didn't have solid numbers until then, but we can get those now.
Yeah, because I want to see where we were at. I know that we've certainly been concerned with those. And so with this reentry, that's where I really want to look at some of the numbers as well, is because we've been hearing from parents about the reentry, that they need to get their kids in hybrid because of the difficulties that they're having. So just another added part to this whole thing. I really wish we would have gotten those vaccines 2 weeks ago. I tell you, if I could just, and I think we just need to go sit on the governor's at the governor's office, and she's got to push
Nicely,
this.
of course.
Yes. Thank you.
Please, yeah,
you,
nicely
Catherine.
for you. I would like if you would have just a second to let Renee tell you that at the other end, just some thoughts she has, but I thought they were brilliant. So I wanted to give her a chance at what we might do at the end of the year to help those seniors that aren't quite finished. Has a plan for what we might be able to do to maybe get a few more. And she'll bring that back in greater detail, but I thought it was such a great idea. Renee, would you be willing just to kind of share a little bit for seniors and then maybe even for some of our other students after seniors are gone?
Sure. Seniors usually get out at the very beginning of May, so they're out a little bit earlier than everyone else. And those senior teachers as well don't have kids. They're finalizing everything and getting everything ready. And so that, and then with the 10 extended days on our year, it would be nice to be able to use that and the teachers that are still on contract for credit recovery purposes for those seniors who are, and we could really, grab probably a good amount of seniors. If you had 2 sessions in those 10 days, you could get a full credit. And it's really close to the same hours as summer school. It's also an incentive for students who are currently not doing well to know that they wouldn't have to go those extra 10 days to make up those classes. So it's just another way to recover credit that they may need to graduate.
It separates this, as Renee's saying, the won'ts from the can'ts. And so if you really can't do it, it gives you that extra help for just intensive work to get through. And if you can do it, but you've chosen not to, it does, as she said, give you an incentive to go ahead and work hard and get it done. So, and it's not unusual. I mean, that's what colleges do all the time with intercession classes, is you just become immersed in it for a couple of weeks. And the hope is that you can be immersed enough that you can get enough that you could get through and pass the exam. So I think it's a great idea. And I think it would give us an extra boost. It's after the fact, it's not what we want to do. We want to work it until they get there. But for those that don't quite make it, there's a plan, emergency plan, to give them that extra boost to maybe get through that last class that they just didn't quite finish.
That's a great idea. Thank you, Ren.
Thank
It was
you.
hers.
Yeah, thank you. Wynn Coleman, go ahead.
I wanted to just say that as initially when the discussion was about having maybe the 9th graders or the freshmen and the 6th graders return, my thought when I heard that was consideration maybe for the seniors, for kind of, giving them that year and that kind of connection. But I also was curious the number of seniors that have either early release or late arrival, and if getting that group back would minimize some of the exposure that we're talking about and that concern. And so I thought that might be one way to kind of address this, is still get some of the students back. So.
That's a great idea. And I would share that I've heard from some other districts that they are eliminating those for anybody who is not on track to graduate. And I think we've done that in the past. So if you're not on track to graduate, your late dismissal, your early, all of that goes away. And you begin to really work hard to try to get that knowledge and skills. And I know we've done that in the past, but I know that's one of the things that people are looking at. So exactly as you're saying, that time could be used now to get them back on track. And if they are failing any classes or whatever, they should not be, we should be looking at another option rather than a later one or an early dismissal.
And I mean, I think the other thing too is kind of where I was going with this is that I think that it also might minimize exposure and interaction because these seniors are not taking 7 classes during the day, and so having the students, having the seniors that don't need that credit recovery, but like my daughter who graduated last year. She really could have gone for 4 periods out of 7. And so that in itself, I think that minimizes the exposure and some of the things that we're really kind of addressing in the concern of kind of that mingling that was brought up. So in addition to the credit recovery, I think that there might be some opportunity for maybe feeling a little bit better if and when that time comes that we look at some type of hybrid opportunity.
Thank you, Wen. I'll go over to you in 1 second, Catherine. But I mean, when we're looking at kind of I just don't want to leave this meeting with just like this wishy-washy, like, yeah, we're looking on it, like type of thing. I mean, what are we thinking as far as a timeline? Like, when do we, is that maybe what Catherine's somewhat going to ask, but like, what do we think as far as getting at least one group in? And I'm not going to try to tie you down, and I hope any news media listening to us doesn't, but what are we looking at as far as maybe getting in one of those groups into the school? How soon can we do that?
If we were to start back, I think everyone said we probably could not do it before February 22nd. And that's when most of the other districts are starting. The only exception to that of all the districts I've talked to was Farmington and Hobbs. But Hobbs is in a completely different situation than the rest of us. So
yeah, okay. So we're hoping at least to try to aim for a February 22nd-ish type. That's what we're looking at, seeing if we can do that, if that's workable. Is that my understanding correctly?
Yes, if the board decides to go back to any hybrid learning, the earliest we could do that would probably be February the 22nd.
Catherine, did you want to add to that?
No, that was what I wrote in big letters right here is time frame to accomplish this. And because we know that, let me tell you, the disservice that came out with the announcement last week is all these kids in secondary learning that wanted to go back to school in their head, and their parents thought they could be back at school February 8th. I mean, that's kind of like what the headline almost looked like. And I had to tell people that's not how it works. I mean, when we got the information for bringing back our elementary, and we were we were a leader in bringing back our elementary into hybrid. I mean, we were several weeks after what they said the date that we can come back at. And I remember at the 11th hour, they were still sending us updated guidelines on how to do that. And our staff had to work the whole entire weekend I think that was the cafeteria, some of the things that they had to do at the last minute. So, to explain that out, to explain to people, especially with districts our size, you couldn't do February 8th. There's so many trying to figure out how many students want to go, then figuring out the schedules and then the transportation and everything else. So hopefully that comes across, that people understand why you couldn't do February 8th, and even February 22nd even sounds like it might even be pushing it, trying to get this accomplished. I mean, like I said, when we did the elementary, we definitely pushed it. I'm trying to get that open even when we did, and especially getting some new guidance towards the end. But I think that, there's a lot to work out, and trying to figure out how we start this and how to move forward. And again, I know how the teachers feel about the vaccinations, so we've got to really push that as well. So that's a lot to be considering in the next week. I would assume this is going to be going onto the agenda on Monday?
Yes.
Okay.
We try to have a presentation, more of a plan
Mhm.
on the 8th of February. So, but I think we've discussed most of the components of it this evening. I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot that's a whole lot different than what we already discussed. But and again, if I think what I found with other districts is February the 22nd would be a soft start. If that's what, it would not be a hard start. It would not be everybody back. It would be very limited. And that's, again, that's what other districts are doing. And I'm sure they're having the very same conversation that we're having tonight of how do you do that in a very short period of time. So that's assuming a soft start with a limited number of students. It's not assuming everyone to come back. And you're exactly right. It raised expectations. Unfortunately, without people really understanding what all had to be done. And again, one of the things is that's going to be a factor in this is there's 89 school districts. And so all of those districts have to be visited by the public ed department and their buildings and their programs approved. And we're all getting in line to have that done. And we've all been told that may not happen when you want it. So that's another factor we'll have zero control over. And another factor will also be the schedule of the fire marshals. They do have other things to do too. And so this isn't the only job they have. So there are so many variables right now that are unknown that, there's some things that could change. And then my last comment is when we did the Staff Advisory Council meeting this last week, we heard very clearly from the folks who attended that the teachers need days in their classroom to get back and set up. And so that was something also that we did at elementary, and it was a very good thing to do. And we're, I don't know that they would have been nearly as ready had that not been allowed. So that's a tentative date, but that is the date we all kind of got locked into because of the extracurricular piece. And I think that's kind of everyone thought, okay, then that's the date that we've got to aim for, if in fact going back to hybrid learning. But I again, no district is looking that I've talked to bringing everybody back and doing a soft start. And part of that soft start is to see what happens, to see how safe it is, to see how well it works, to get some data before, we move forward with more students. So that's, you're right. It's pushing it to even do the 22nd.
Right. And I do want to say, and I think pretty much all the board can agree on this, is that we are so appreciative to all of you for all that you have done, and can't imagine the amount of hours that you're putting in to reviewing and trying to figure this out. And it's a huge undertaking, and we would never imagine being here a year ago. And so I just want to say that how much we appreciate that all you guys are doing, and the principals and counselors. I mean, it just really takes you all to make this work in this school year. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Collin. Kurt Schmidt is on, and I'd love to hear from him.
Thank you, President Galbraith, Dr. Cleveland, members of the board. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I would like to circle back to a conversation earlier. In the very important conversation you have about extracurricular activities, it's important to realize that fine arts are academic subjects. They earn a grade, they earn credit. In fact, they've been going on since day one. They're meeting in classrooms. They do have co-curricular components after school, but they're directly related to the classroom. So I just want to clarify that in the discussion of extracurricular activities, that we don't kind of lump fine arts into that, because they're similar, but they're different in that they are academic subjects. So.
Yes. Thank you, Kurt Schmidt. How has our band been doing, Kurt? I just real quick, have you heard conversations as far as getting them back? I think we talked a little bit about it, but as far as our band, I think, is one of the harder ones to go back into a classroom with. But have you heard anything just new on that and what we're going to do with that?
All the fine arts are on a spectrum of least challenging to more challenging. The least challenging ones are, for instance, orchestra, percussion instruments. They can simply be masked, maintain social distancing, since they're not playing like a wind instrument, that sort of thing. On the more problematic end of the spectrum are band and choir, where the PED has said no singing or playing wind instruments in the classroom. We are working, as Renee mentioned, to get clarification on that and try to get that turned around, because there is science saying that with mitigation techniques, it can be done safe. In fact, we've got an experiment in our backyard with the Albuquerque Youth Symphony in Albuquerque. They've been doing this since the fall, and they've had absolutely no transmission, no problems whatsoever. We're just, again, there's a major study that's coming out any day now, a very large study with very sound science, saying these mitigation techniques, preliminary results say that they can reduce the transmission from 60 to 90%. So, that being said, our band and choirs are going on. They're frustrated, but it's getting better as we go on in the virtual setting. Some of the band directors have said they've had their best attendance yet, especially with the new schedule this semester. They're doing great things. I think we've shared some virtual concerts with you. The arts are resilient, and they continue to thrive.
Thank you for sharing that with us. That's great. Thank you. Noreen Scott, you have something to say. You're still muted. I'll have to get Noreen a jar too.
I have, yeah, it sounds like I need one too. Kurt actually answered one of my questions about the arts and drama. He kind of touched on band. I appreciated that. Secondarily, I think that my further concern is that we do have a clear outline of a timeline, as Catherine said, of how we will phase in if we're able to. And that I think is critical for you to come to us with next week. And finally, I want to echo what Jeffrey said. I can't thank our staff enough. I am so proud to be able to work in this school district as a board member. Dr. Cleveland, you have worked enormous number of hours. We do not in any way have the ability to thank you for what you have done through an extraordinarily difficult time. And I so appreciate that. I know the hours you're working because I have an office not far from you, and I drive past and see your car at all hours. So, I mean, whether it's Sunday or whether it's a Friday evening, you're working. And I'm so grateful you stuck with us. Thank you.
Well, it's not me. I can tell you that. It's the staff, and we have an amazing staff, and they do amazing work. And Rio Rancho's always been short of money from day one. That's been the one consistent thing we've had all through the years. But what we've also had consistent is that we've had outstanding people who stepped up and did the job. And so this has been the case. Everyone has worked hard. Everyone has worked hard, and there isn't anyone who hasn't. And so just want to really stress it's been a team effort across the district. We have amazing people that we're working with, and I think that's one of the reasons we are so protective of the staff, because we see what a great job they do. And not all districts are as lucky as we are, the people that we have work for us, and so work with us every day. The other thing is it's just been hard on everyone. I'll laugh at, you'll laugh at it. So excuse me a little bit, because I usually don't do that. But superintendents were working on Sunday afternoon, and we were all comparing some things, and we were talking back and forth. And so finally, one of my colleagues, who she probably would prefer I not use her name, she finally just said, "Politics suck. I'm out of here. I'm going for a." And we're all just kind of like this. But, we have dealt with a very difficult situation this year. Everybody has, every district has. The positive, we're going to get through this. We are going to get through this, and we are going to survive. And we are going to be in a better position next year than we end this year. But I just have to tell you, we have phenomenal people who work in this district. And without them, we would not be able to do the job that we done. That also being said is I think people have given all they have. You know, they've just given all they have. And what's so sad is they've given all they had, and we know that it's still not the best for what our kids need. And we all know that. And so we, you know, I said the other day in a meeting, I'd sure hate to be one of the salespersons that were out there selling all virtual programs today for charter schools and all that, because I think the general public has had plenty of all online. And I do think one of the things that will come out of this is a greater appreciation for the work that people have done. And in-person learning does matter. And it is, you know, the individuals that are in our classrooms or who support our classrooms, who keep our building, you know, that personal factor is so, so important. And so I appreciate those kind of words, but I'll tell you, it goes to everybody, not to me. And it's just, I can't tell you how much, how hard they've worked. And then my last comment is we thank you as a board. What an awful year. What a challenging year to be a board member. There's never been anything, even when we were starting the district up and everything was new, never been a year like this one. And so the amount of time and effort that you have had to give and, you know, the anguish I know you have faced in many of these situations, I know it's been really, really super hard. We all know that and we recognize that and we thank you as well. And so it's just, we're going to get through this together. And I think we're kind of tired of hearing that. I'm kind of ready to get it passed and to be done with it. But it has been hard. So thank you for your attention this evening. We've heard a lot of good comments from you, a lot of good suggestions. We've heard a lot of food for thought from our speakers this evening. We thank our union folks for being here with us this evening. I said the other day to Renee, food for thought, and she said, I don't need any more food for thought. And so I told her, put a sign on her door that says, on a diet, no more food for thought. And I think maybe we're all feeling at that point, no more food for thought. But thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Cleveland. Just to kind of close this up, board, is there any other questions or comments that you need to make?
No, just if we, on the next board meeting, if we can keep it light on everything else that is not necessary for us to go over at the next board meeting, and just keep it with what we need to focus on with this. And because if we're going to be bringing in the union presidents, we need to make sure we have some time to listen to that and have a good discussion. So anything that does not need to be on the agenda, that's very important. You know, if it's not, we need to get it done next Monday. That's my suggestion. I mean, we always need to have things done on an agenda, but you know, some things could wait an extra couple of weeks. And I would like the numbers as well. If we can have that by the next board meeting on those students, the ones that might have not passed.
Student failure rates. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Anyone else? Yeah, Catherine, I don't know if I can agree because I really enjoy meetings that go till 10:30 at night. I mean, just kidding.
3 hours, you know, so it's 3 hours tonight, so we're good, not 5 like I was predicting.
President Galbraith, I hear you. So I'm thinking about what reports I could add so that you can have a full evening of enjoyment of listening. But, you know, and honestly, we probably can, but I will tell you after that, we're going to have to kick into gear again because as the legislature begins to do more of its work and we begin to look at budget and, you know, there'll be a time we're moving into a really busy time of year. So, but I definitely think we can do that for the next meeting. Absolutely.
I think that if we need to do special meetings, that might be versus having 1 o'clock meetings. So thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Anyone, district staff, everyone good? I just want to make sure I'm not cutting anyone off. And our Billy and Gino, you feel good too? Okay. All right. And I want to echo and say thank you to Gino and Billy for being on tonight. We appreciate it very much. It helps to bring a light to everything that, you know, we're trying to look at, and it's an important that we hear those things. And I want to echo what everyone has said. Just thank you to our board. Thank you to Dr. Cleveland, our district staff. It's been a really rough year. It's been a really, really rough year. I do want to say one last thing just to both our families in the community and to our teachers as well. I think one thing that I keep hearing is that people are starting to say, I don't think that anyone's hearing me. I'm not being heard. And that's not true. We are hearing you. We're reading your emails. I listen to people in the community. I look at social media, and I know all the board members do. We listen to what Billy's saying, and she sends those things on to us. And you are being heard. It's just that there's not a really great answer to everything that we need to make decisions for. And I hope, though, that everyone will remember that, man, our kids, like, we need to help them through this. And I think that's what we try to do is try to figure out what's best for our kids. But also, of course, there's so many components that go into that. And we, our teachers, we love you. We are doing our best to keep you safe. And I hope that our greater community of New Mexico, of our state of New Mexico, all of our legislators who might tune in tonight, our governor, maybe she's listening right now, please, please help us. Please be the hero. We ask you to be the hero for our district. We really need you. Our children need you. Our children need to stay here in New Mexico. We have families moving away. Please be the hero and help get our teachers vaccinated so we can get these schools opened and our kids back to learning the way that they need to. So thank you all again for being here tonight. Dr. Cleveland, anything else that we need to hit on?
No, just again, thanks to everybody for being here, for taking their time to come and present this evening. And everything was well said and heartfelt. And so thank you all, everyone, for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. So for our advanced planning, we have February 8th will be a finance committee meeting that will be at 4:30. Also February 8th will be our next regular board meeting at 5:30. February 10th through the 13th is the 2021 NMSBA Board Institute. And then on February 22nd, we will also have one of our regular board meetings at 5:30. So thank you all for coming tonight, and the meeting tonight is adjourned.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Jen.